Hi everyone, welcome back to Red Umbrella. I hope you're all doing well today. Before we begin, I'd like to kindly ask you to subscribe. It's completely free and it genuinely helps us keep improving these videos for the amazing community we're building here. Today, we're breaking down one insane theory for every Family Guy location across a 2-hour deep dive. Alright, that's enough from me. Let's get started. First up, we have the theory that Spooner Street is a government simulation testing the Griffins. The Griffins. Spooner Street looks like any other suburban neighborhood in America, but when you actually pay attention to what happens there, something becomes terrifyingly clear. The Griffin family lives in what can only be described as a controlled environment, designed to test human behavior under increasingly absurd circumstances. The evidence is everywhere once you start looking for it, and it extends far beyond just their street to every location in Quahog and the surrounding areas. Start with the most obvious problem. Peter Griffin dies constantly. He gets crushed, exploded, mutilated, and killed in ways that should absolutely end a human life. But he always comes back perfectly fine by the next scene or episode. In one episode, he literally gets his entire skeleton removed and is just a pile of flesh on the floor, then he's completely normal moments later. In another, he gets decapitated and his head rolls around, having a conversation. These are not cartoon physics, these are simulation resets. When a test subject sustains damage that would end the experiment, the simulation simply restores them to baseline and continues collecting data. The same thing happens to other characters on Spooner Street and throughout Quahog. Meg gets shot, Cleveland falls out of his bathtub and crashes through his house over and over. Quagmire survives injuries that would kill a normal person dozens of times over. The show even acknowledges this directly when characters mention previous deaths or injuries and other characters act like it never happened. In one episode, Peter references dying and coming back, and Lois looks at him like he's insane. That's because in her current iteration of the simulation, that death never occurred in her accessible memory files. Look at how Spooner Street itself behaves. The houses change layouts constantly. The Griffin house has rooms that appear and disappear depending on what the episode needs. Sometimes there's a basement, sometimes there isn't. The upstairs configuration changes. Cleveland's house gets completely destroyed when he moves away. Then a new identical house appears in the exact same spot with different people in it. That's not construction. That's the simulation generating new test environments using existing assets. When Cleveland returns years later, his house is back exactly where it was. The simulation just reloaded a previous save state. The locations in Quahog follow patterns that only make sense if you're running controlled experiments on human behavior. The Drunken Clam never changes. It's always the same bar with the same setup serving the same people. Peter, Quagmire, Cleveland, and Joe sit in the exact same spots every single time. That's not habit, that's programming. The simulation places them in identical scenarios repeatedly to test how their responses vary under different emotional or physical states. They've had thousands of conversations in those exact same seats, and nobody questions why they never sit anywhere else in the entire bar. The Pawtucket Brewery where Peter works makes even less sense when you examine it closely. The factory changes size and layout depending on the episode. Sometimes it's a small local brewery, sometimes it's a massive industrial complex with hundreds of employees. The company gets bought out, changes ownership, goes bankrupt, and somehow Peter always has the same job doing the same thing. In one episode, the entire brewery is destroyed in an explosion, but it's back to normal the next time we see it. The simulation doesn't care about continuity because it's testing behavioral patterns, not maintaining a coherent reality. James Woods High School is another controlled environment. The students never graduate, they never age, they cycle through the same social dynamics over and over. Meg goes through horrible traumatic experiences that should fundamentally change a person, but she resets to her baseline depressed outcast personality every episode. That's what happens when you're testing how much psychological damage a subject can endure before complete breakdown. The simulation pushes Meg to her limits repeatedly, then resets her to continue gathering data. Quahog itself has geography that makes absolutely no sense. The town has everything a major city would have. Multiple airports, a shipping port, massive industrial zones, but it's also a small town where everyone knows each other. The population changes dramatically depending on what the episode needs. Sometimes it's a tiny community, sometimes there are massive crowds of thousands of people. The layout of the town changes. Buildings appear and disappear. Streets connect differently. That's because Quahog is not a real place, it's a testing ground that gets reconfigured based on experimental parameters. The most damning evidence is how the government interacts with the Griffins and Quahog. The CIA shows up constantly. Government agents are always running operations in the town. There are secret facilities, underground bases, and military installations everywhere. In multiple episodes, we see that Quahog is specifically targeted for government experiments. They test weapons there, run psychological operations, release biological agents. Why would the government repeatedly use the same small town for dangerous experiments unless that town was specifically designed for testing? Stan Smith, from American Dad Lives in Langley Falls, and he's mentioned Quahog multiple times. He works for the CIA and has direct knowledge of government simulations and test programs. When American Dad and Family Guy did a crossover episode, Stan interacted with the Griffins like he was observing test subjects. He wasn't surprised by anything that happened. He just watched and took mental notes. That's exactly what a handler would do when checking on a long-term experiment. The time inconsistencies throughout the show prove this is a simulation. The Griffins have been the same age for over 20 years of episodes. Stewie is always 1 year old. Chris and Meg never graduate high school. Peter and Lois never age. But the show references current events and technology from different decades, all happening simultaneously. They had episodes in the early 2000s, the 2010s, and the 2020s, but the characters remained frozen. That's not a cartoon convention, that's a controlled variable in an experiment. The simulation can run for decades, testing different scenarios while keeping the subjects at fixed ages to maintain consistent data. Characters develop then lose skills and knowledge randomly. Peter learns things in one episode, then has no memory of that skill later. Meg becomes confident and popular briefly, then reverts to being an outcast. Brian writes a successful novel, then goes back to being a failed writer. These aren't character inconsistencies, these are the simulation testing different versions of the same people. What happens if we give Peter this knowledge? How does Brian respond to success versus failure? Let's run both scenarios and compare the data. The awareness characters sometimes show is terrifying. Peter has directly addressed the camera and talked about being in a TV show. He's referenced episodes and seasons. He's broken the fourth wall so many times it's basically not even a wall anymore. Brian has done the same thing. They know they're being watched, they know they're in something artificial, but the simulation prevents them from fully understanding or escaping. They get glimpses of the truth, then the memory gets wiped and they continue as test subjects. Death in Quahog works differently than reality. When someone dies, they either come back immediately, or they go to an afterlife that characters can visit and return from. Peter has met God, Jesus, and death himself multiple times. He's been to heaven and hell, and come back. That's not possible in actual reality, but it's completely possible in a simulation that includes afterlife subroutines for testing religious and philosophical responses in subjects. The chicken fights Peter has with Ernie the giant chicken are particularly revealing. These fights last for minutes of screen time, cause millions of dollars in property damage, destroy huge sections of Quahog, and kill multiple bystanders. Then everything is completely fine the next scene. Buildings are repaired, casualties are forgotten, and nobody faces any consequences. Peter has fought this chicken dozens of times in elaborate extended battles that should result in his arrest, bankruptcy, and lifelong imprisonment. But the simulation just resets the environment and lets it happen again because it's collecting data on escalating violence and conflict resolution. Joe Swanson is paralyzed, but the show has revealed multiple times that he can walk. He's been shown standing and walking in various episodes, then he's back in his wheelchair later with no explanation. The simulation is testing disability responses. How does a paraplegic man maintain relationships, perform police duties, and function in society? What happens if we temporarily remove the disability? How do his behavioral patterns change? These are questions a government program would want answered. Quagmire's house is directly next to the Griffins, and he's been their neighbor for decades. He's a commercial airline pilot who's home constantly and never seems to actually fly anywhere. He's admitted to hundreds of sexual crimes that should have him in prison for life, but he remains free and employed. That's because he's also a test subject. The simulation is studying extreme sexual deviance and how it manifests in a social environment. What are the limits? How does society around him respond? What enables this behavior to continue unchecked? The Griffin House itself has technology and features that appear and disappear. Sometimes they have advanced security systems, sometimes they have none. Their TV gets destroyed repeatedly and is always replaced immediately. They go from wealthy to bankrupt and back to middle class within episodes. The simulation adjusts their economic status to test how the family responds to different financial pressures. Meg's treatment by the family is psychological warfare. Every member of the Griffin family relentlessly abuses and degrades her for no logical reason. She's not a bad person, she's actually often the most reasonable and moral member of the family, but they treat her like garbage constantly. This is a controlled study on scapegoating and family dynamics. What happens when one member is systematically dehumanized by the others? How much abuse can she endure? What are her breaking points? The simulation has been running this test for years. Stewie's intelligence and capabilities make no sense unless he's a variable in the experiment. A 1-year-old baby who can build time machines, create advanced weapons, and speak in a sophisticated British accent, while also behaving like a normal infant when convenient. The simulation gave him genius-level intelligence to test how an advanced intellect would develop in an infant body within a dysfunctional family structure. Sometimes other characters can understand him, sometimes they can't. The simulation adjusts this based on experimental needs. Brian the talking dog is another clear variable. He's a dog who walks upright, speaks, drinks, drives, cars, and functions as a human. He dates human women. He has a son who's also a talking dog. Nobody in Quahog thinks this is weird because they're all part of the simulation. They've been programmed to accept this as normal. But in episodes where characters from outside Quahog visit, they're shocked by the talking dog. That's the reaction real people would have, proving that Quahog operates under different rules than the outside world. The Griffin's neighbors change constantly. People move in and out of Spooner Street with no explanation. The houses are occupied by different families in different episodes. The simulation is testing neighborhood dynamics and how the Griffins interact with various personality types. When an experiment is complete, those subjects are removed and new ones are inserted. News anchor Tom Tucker and his team report on events in Quahog that would be national or international news in the real world, but they're always treated as local stories. Alien invasions, zombie outbreaks, nuclear accidents, none of it makes news beyond Quahog. That's because the simulation is contained. Information doesn't flow out to the real world because Quahog is isolated for testing purposes. The recurring gags and cutaways that happen throughout every episode are the simulation glitching. Peter remembers things that never happened to him. He recalls working jobs he never had and meeting people he never met. These are other simulation runs bleeding through. The system stores all iterations of the test, and sometimes subjects access memories from alternate scenarios that were previously executed. Quahog has been destroyed multiple times. Nuclear bombs, natural disasters, invasions, apocalyptic events. The town gets completely annihilated, then it's perfectly fine the next episode with no explanation. You cannot rebuild an entire city overnight, but you can reset a simulation to a previous save state instantly. The experiment continues regardless of how catastrophic the previous scenario became. The schools in Quahog are another test environment. Buddy Cianci Junior High, where Chris goes, has the same problems as James Woods High. Students never progress, staff members change randomly, and horrible things happen constantly with no real consequences. The simulation is testing educational environments and child development under various negative conditions. Every location the Griffins visit outside Quahog has the same strange properties. When they go to different countries or cities, those places behave like small sets with limited areas to explore. Foreign countries are stereotyped and simplified. Historical periods they visit through time travel don't follow actual history. That's because the simulation only renders what's necessary for the current test. It's not creating entire real countries or accurate historical periods. It's generating enough environmental detail to test how the griffins respond to those scenarios. The fact that these patterns exist across every location in the show, from Spooner Street to the furthest places the griffins visit, reveals the scope of this program. This is not a small experiment. This is a massive government simulation testing human behavior, family dynamics, social responses, and psychological limits using the griffin family and everyone in their environment as subjects. Everything resets, nothing has permanent consequences, and the test continues indefinitely collecting data on every possible human response to every possible scenario. Spooner Street is ground zero for the most extensive behavioral experiment ever conducted, and the griffins have no idea they're living in a government testing facility disguised as suburban America. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that the Drunken Clam sits on a time rift that resets Quahog after every catastrophe. The Drunken Clam sits on a time rift that resets Quahog. After every catastrophe, the Drunken Clam is not just a bar. When you look at everything that happens in and around that building, when you track the patterns of how Quahog recovers from catastrophic events, when you notice where Peter Griffin and his friends are during almost every major reset, the evidence becomes impossible to ignore. The Drunken Clam sits directly on top of a time rift that continuously loops Quahog back to a baseline state, erasing destruction and resetting reality itself. Think about how the bar functions. Peter, Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland sit in the exact same booth every single time they visit. They have sat in those same spots for thousands of conversations across decades of episodes. They never sit anywhere else in the entire establishment. They never choose different seats. They never even acknowledge that they always sit in that specific location. That booth is not just their preferred spot, it's the anchor point. The rift emanates from beneath that exact location, and the people who sit there most frequently are caught in the strongest part of the temporal loop. The Drunken Clam itself never changes. The interior layout stays identical episode after episode, year after year. The same booths, the same bar, the same layout. Other locations in Quahog shift and reconfigure constantly. The Griffin House changes rooms and layouts. Buildings appear and disappear throughout the town. But the Drunken Clam remains frozen in one configuration. That's because it exists at the center of the time rift. It's the one stable point in Quahog that everything else resets around. When time loops back, the rift uses the Drunken Clam as the template for what Quahog should look like. Every major catastrophe in Quahog gets erased the same way. The town has been destroyed by nuclear explosions, alien invasions, natural disasters, and zombie outbreaks. In one episode, a giant chicken rampages through the streets. In another, the entire town floods. In Nightsign, multiple episodes, buildings explode and whole city blocks get leveled. But within one episode, sometimes within one scene, everything is perfectly restored. You cannot rebuild a city that fast. You cannot repair that level of destruction overnight, unless time itself is resetting and undoing the damage. Peter's chicken fights with Ernie provide the clearest evidence. These battles destroy massive sections of Quahog. They crash through dozens of buildings, cause explosions, kill bystanders, and create millions of dollars in property damage. The fights last for several minutes of continuous destruction. Then the fight ends, and in the very next scene, everything is fine. The buildings are intact. The dead people are alive again. The destruction never happened. That's not fast cleanup, that's temporal reset. The rift detects catastrophic damage to Quahog and loops time back to before it occurred. Notice where these fights often start or end. Multiple chicken fights have involved the Drunken Clam or areas immediately surrounding it. Peter and Ernie crash through the bar, destroy it completely, then later it's perfectly fine. The rift resets its own location first, then expands outward to restore the rest of Quahog. The bar is always the first thing that comes back because it's the source of the reset. The characters who spend the most time at the Drunken Clam show signs of temporal awareness that others don't. Peter has broken the fourth wall and referenced previous episodes more than any other character. He's mentioned dying and coming back to life. He's talked about things that happened in earlier seasons. He remembers events that other characters have completely forgotten. That's because he sits directly over the rift for hours every day. The temporal energy seeps into him and gives him fragmented memories of previous loops. Joe is also shown awareness. He's a paraplegic who sometimes can walk in certain episodes, then goes back to being paralyzed with no explanation. In one episode, he's shown standing and walking around perfectly fine. Then the next episode, he's back in his wheelchair and nobody mentions it. That's not inconsistent writing, that's evidence of timeline shifts. Different versions of Joe from different loops are bleeding through. The Joe who can walk exists in one timeline, the paralyzed Joe exists in another, and the rift causes them to overlap. Quagmire works as a commercial airline pilot, but he's at the Drunken Clam constantly. He's home in Quahog almost every day drinking with his friends instead of flying. His job makes no sense with how often he's at that bar unless time is working differently for him. He could be experiencing temporal compression where his flights happen in looped time that doesn't progress forward. He goes to work, time loops, and he's back at the Drunken Clam in what feels like the same day. Cleveland fell out of his bathtub and crashed through his house in the most famous scene from the show. This happened multiple times across different episodes. His entire house got destroyed repeatedly. Then he moved away to Stool Bend, Virginia for years. When he came back to Quahog, his house was exactly where it was before, completely intact and identical. Nobody rebuilt that house. The time rift restored it when Cleveland returned because his presence is connected to the loop. He spent years drinking at the Drunken Clam. The rift has his data, and when he came back, it regenerated his house from the stored timeline. The Drunken Clam sits on the corner of a specific intersection in Quahog, and that intersection is where multiple major events have occurred. Car crashes, shootouts, explosions, all happening near that bar. Then everything resets. The location attracts catastrophic events because the temporal energy destabilizes reality in that area. Things that shouldn't happen become possible near a time rift. Physics works differently. Causality breaks down. That's why absurd, impossible events cluster around that part of town. Horace was the bartender at the Drunken Clam for years. Then he died. He got shot and killed in the bar itself. Then, several episodes later, he was back, alive and working again with no explanation of how he survived or came back to life. Everyone just accepted that Horace was there again. That's because the rift resurrected him. When someone dies at the exact center point of a time rift, the loop brings them back. Horace died too close to the source, so the next reset regenerated him from a previous save state. The conversations that happen at the Drunken Clam repeat thematically. Peter and his friends have the same types of discussions over and over. They talk about women, work, their lives, but the conversations follow patterns. They'll discuss something, reach a conclusion, then several episodes later have almost the same conversation again, like the previous one never happened. They're stuck in dialogue loops. The rift causes them to cycle through similar interactions repeatedly because time keeps bringing them back to familiar patterns. Death himself has appeared in Quahog multiple times, and he's been to the Drunken Clam. He's shown up at that bar specifically to interact with Peter. Death knows about the rift. He has to, because his job involves collecting souls, and in Quahog people die then come back constantly. He can't properly collect anyone because the time rift keeps resetting them to life. He shows up at the bar because that's where the anomaly originates. He's trying to understand why his normal death collection process doesn't work in this town. God has also appeared in Family Guy multiple times, and he's interacted with Peter directly. God exists outside normal time, and he would absolutely be aware of a time rift. In episodes where Peter meets God, God never seems surprised by anything Peter has done or will do. He knows everything because he can see all the loops. He watches Peter die and reset over and over. The fact that God allows this rift to continue existing suggests it serves some higher purpose. Or he finds it entertaining to watch the same people loop through infinite scenarios. The show has done multiple time travel episodes where characters go to different periods. They go to the past, they go to the future, they create alternate timelines. In one episode, Stewie and Brian travel through time repeatedly and create branching realities, but they always end up back in the present-day Quahog at baseline. No matter how much they change, everything snaps back. That's the rift pulling reality back to its default state. You can temporarily break out of the loop through extreme measures like time machines, but the rift eventually reasserts the prime timeline. Stewie built a time machine in the Griffin house. a baby built a functioning time travel device. That should be completely impossible, but Stewie lives in Quahog, where temporal energy from the rift makes time manipulation easier. The rift weakens the barriers between past, present, and future. Building a time machine in normal reality would be impossible with current technology, but in a town that sits on a time rift, the ambient temporal radiation makes it achievable. Stewie unknowingly draws power from the same rift that keeps resetting his world. Brian has died and come back to life. He got hit by a car and died. The family got a new dog. Then Stewie used his time machine to go back and prevent Brian's death. Brian came back and the new dog never existed. That timeline got completely erased. But here's the thing, Stewie only succeeded because the rift allowed it. The rift wants certain people in certain positions. Brian is part of the core group. He drinks at the Drunken Clam with Peter. His presence is locked into the loop, so when he died, the rift enabled his resurrection through Stewie's intervention. The bar has a specific atmosphere that regulars have mentioned. It's described as comfortable, familiar, like home. People feel drawn there. Peter chooses to spend almost every evening at the Drunken Clam instead of with his family. That's not normal behavior even for an alcoholic. The rift pulls people in. It needs the same people in the same places to maintain the loop properly. Peter feels compelled to sit in that booth because the temporal energy is calling him back to his anchor point. Other bars exist in Quahog, but none of them have the same permanence as the Drunken Clam. Characters visit other establishments and those places change, close down, or disappear. The Drunken Clam never closes. It never goes out of business despite having only a handful of regular customers. It never gets renovated or updated. It exists in stasis because it's the eye of the temporal storm. Everything around it changes and resets, but it remains constant. The building itself has survived events that should have destroyed it. It's been in the path of explosions, floods, and attacks. The structure should have been demolished multiple times, but it's always intact afterwards. During the chicken fights, Peter and Ernie crash through the walls and ceiling, completely wrecking the interior. Next scene, it's perfect again. The rift repairs its own location automatically because if the Drunken Clam is destroyed, the anchor point is lost and the entire reset mechanism could fail. Alcohol acts as a conductor for temporal energy. When people drink at the bar, they're consuming liquid that's been sitting in the strongest part of the rift. The alcohol absorbs temporal radiation, and when people drink it, they become more connected to the loop. That's why Peter's awareness increases when he drinks. He's literally consuming time energy. The more he drinks at that bar, the more he remembers from previous loops, the more he can break the fourth wall and reference things that shouldn't exist in his reality. The Drunken Clam has existed in Quahog for decades in Showtime. Jerome worked there as bartender for a period. Horace came back after Jerome. The ownership and staff change, but the building and the core regulars remain. That's because people are temporary, but the rift is permanent. Workers come and go, but Peter and his friends are bound to that booth. They're the constants that the loop requires. When you map out every major reset event in Quahog and track where the main characters were during or immediately before the reset, they're almost always at or near the Drunken Clam. Before the nuclear explosion episode, Peter was drinking at the bar. Before major disasters, someone from the core group is there. The rift doesn't activate randomly. It responds to the presence of specific individuals. When Peter, Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland are together at that booth, they create a resonance that stabilizes the loop. The booth they sit in is worn in a specific way. The seats have permanent indentations from decades of the same people sitting in the same positions. That's not just wear and tear, that's temporal imprinting. Their presence has literally worn grooves into reality at that spot. The rift has mapped their exact positions and keeps pulling them back to create those same grooves deeper and deeper with each loop. Quahog's layout makes no sense geographically, and the Drunken Clam is always somehow central to wherever the Griffins are. No matter where they're going or coming from, the bar is conveniently located. That's because space itself warps around the rift. The town's geography isn't fixed, it's fluid and reorganizes itself with the Drunken Clam as the central point. Roads curve differently depending on what the current loop needs, but they always lead back to that bar. Characters have walked out of the Drunken Clam after drinking and immediately ended up in situations that should be geographically impossible. Peter leaves the bar and he's suddenly at the docks or downtown or near the airport, despite those locations being miles apart. The rift creates spatial shortcuts. When you exit the building, you emerge wherever the current timeline needs you to be. Space folds around that bar. The time rift explains why nobody in Quahog ages. Peter, Lois, and their friends have looked the same for over 20 years of episodes. Their children never graduate school. Babies stay babies. The rift keeps everyone locked at specific ages because that's part of the loop parameters. For the reset to work properly, everyone needs to return to the same age after each cycle. The Drunken Clam maintains this by radiating temporal stasis across the entire town. Mayor Adam West showed awareness of impossible things happening in Quahog. He acted erratically and saw things others didn't because he spent time near the rift. He wasn't crazy, he was temporally sensitive. He could perceive the edges of different timelines bleeding together. When he died in real life and the character was retired from the show, the rift lost one of its aware observers. The show changed after that because the loop had one less anchor point. The drinks served at the Drunken Clam are always the same. Peter orders Pawtucket Patriot Ale every time. It's always available, always the same price, served in the same glass. The consistency is unnatural. Bars run out of beer, prices change, they switch suppliers. But not the Drunken Clam. The rift keeps everything exactly the same, down to the molecular level. Each beer Peter drinks is identical to every other beer he's ever consumed there, because they're all the same beer repeated infinitely. When Peter passes out drunk at the bar, he experiences bizarre dreams and visions. He sees alternate realities, talks to impossible people, visits different time periods. Those aren't drunken hallucinations, they're temporal bleed-through. His unconscious mind at the center of the rift can perceive other loops and timelines. When he wakes up, the visions fade because his conscious mind can't hold on to memories from outside his current timeline. The Drunken Clam is always dark inside regardless of the time of day. The lighting never changes. Whether it's morning, afternoon, or night outside, the bar has the same dim atmosphere. That's temporal disconnection. The interior of the building exists slightly out of sync with normal time flow. Minutes pass differently in there. Peter can spend what feels like an hour drinking, then walk outside and find that several hours have passed, or sometimes only minutes. Every reset centers on the Drunken Clam. Because the rift needs that anchor, Quahog gets destroyed, time loops backward, and everything regenerates outward from that bar. The building comes back first, then Spooner Street, then downtown, then the entire town. Like a recording rewinding and playing forward again, the rift uses its location as the starting point for reconstruction. That's why the bar is indestructible and unchanging. It's not just a building, it's the mechanism holding all of Quahog in a permanent time loop, resetting catastrophes and keeping everyone trapped in an endless cycle that begins and ends with 4 friends sitting in the same booth, drinking the same beer forever. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next, we have the theory that James Woods Regional High is secretly a mind control facility for TV tropes. James Woods Regional High School is not teaching students math, science, and history. When you actually examine what happens in that building, when you track the patterns of behavior among students and staff, when you notice how perfectly everyone fits into specific archetypal roles, the truth becomes clear. James Woods High is a mind control facility designed to program teenagers into acting out television tropes and narrative patterns. Every student is being conditioned to behave like a character from a TV show, and the school itself is the mechanism enforcing these roles. Start with the most obvious evidence. Meg Griffin has attended James Woods High for over 20 years of episodes. She has never graduated. She's been a student there since the show started, experiencing year after year of high school, but she never moves forward. Chris is the same way. He's been in the same grade forever. Neither of them age, neither progresses to the next level, they just loop through high school eternally. That's not normal education, that's conditioning through repetition. The school keeps them locked in their teenage years because that's when people are most susceptible to having their personalities molded into fixed patterns. Look at how the social hierarchy works at James Woods High. Connie D'Amico is the popular girl. She's beautiful, cruel, and rules the school through manipulation and bullying. She has been the popular girl for decades. She never graduates, never loses her status, never stops being the queen bee. That's because she's not a real person developing naturally, she's playing the popular girl trope. The school has programmed her to fulfill that exact role, and she executes it perfectly every single day. Meg is the outcast loser. Every student at the school hates her. She gets bullied relentlessly by everyone from the popular kids to the nerds to random students who have no reason to know her. She's universally despised despite not actually doing anything to deserve it. In many episodes, she's shown being kind, trying to help others, attempting to fit in, but it never works. The entire student body has been programmed to reject her because she's fulfilling the unpopular loser trope. The school needs someone in that role, and Meg has been assigned to it. Chris is the dumb jock wannabe. He's not intelligent, he's overweight, he's socially awkward, but he keeps trying to be athletic and cool. He's playing the lovable idiot trope perfectly. His personality never develops beyond that basic framework. He has moments of hidden talent like his artistic ability, but those moments get suppressed and he reverts back to being the dumb kid. That's the mind control reasserting his assigned role whenever he tries to break out of it. The teachers at James Woods High all fit perfect stereotypes. There's the creepy guidance counselor who's inappropriate with students. There's the burned-out teachers who don't care about education. There's the overly enthusiastic teacher who gets shut down by apathetic students. Every single staff member is a walking TV trope. They don't act like real educators with complex personalities, they act like characters from a high school television show. That's because they're mind-controlled too, programmed to play their roles in the facility. Principal Shepard runs the school, and he's showed knowledge of things that indicate he understands what's really happening. He makes decisions that make no sense for actual education but make perfect sense for maintaining narrative tropes. He allows bullying to continue unchecked because the school needs the bully and victim dynamic. He permits dangerous and illegal activities because those create the drama and conflict that TV shows require. He's not incompetent, he's deliberately managing the facility to ensure maximum trope production. The school has experienced multiple shootings, bomb threats, and violent incidents. In one episode, there's an active shooter situation. In another, violence breaks out among students. These are traumatic, catastrophic events that should fundamentally change the school environment, lead to massive investigations, cause parents to pull their kids out, result in the school being shut down. But nothing changes. The next episode, everything is back to normal. Students return to the same social dynamics, the same routines, the same patterns. That's because the mind control wipes memories and resets everyone to their baseline programming after each incident. The curriculum at James Woods High barely exists. We rarely see actual teaching happening. Classes are just backgrounds for social drama. The students don't learn subject matter, they learn how to play their assigned roles. When we do see lessons, they're designed to reinforce tropes. History class teaches simplified good versus evil narratives. English class focuses on archetypal stories. The entire educational structure is built to program students with narrative patterns rather than knowledge. Every student fits into a clearly defined category. There are the popular kids, the nerds, the jocks, the goths, the band geeks. These groups never overlap, they never mix, they maintain rigid boundaries. That's not how real teenagers work. Real high school students are complex with overlapping interests and fluid social groups. But at James Woods High, everyone stays in their assigned category because the mind control prevents them from breaking their trope. Meg has tried to change her social status multiple times. She's gotten makeovers, joined different groups, attempted to reinvent herself. In one episode, she becomes popular briefly when she starts dating a popular guy. For a moment, she experiences acceptance and social success. Then it gets taken away and she's immediately back to being the most hated person in school. The other students turn on her instantly, erasing any progress she made. That's the mind control kicking in. The facility detected someone breaking their assigned trope and forced them back into position. The school does this to other students too. Neil Goldman is the creepy nerd who's obsessed with Meg. He's been obsessively pursuing her for years despite constant rejection. A real person would move on, develop other interests, mature past this fixation. But Neil can't because he's playing the stalker nerd trope. The school has him locked into that behavior pattern. He exists solely to be creepy toward Meg and get rejected, reinforcing both of their roles. Students at James Woods High repeat the same social conflicts over and over. The popular kids humiliate the unpopular kids, the jocks bully the nerds, the cheerleaders mock everyone else. These dynamics play out in episode after episode with almost identical scenarios. That's not realistic teenage behavior, that's scripted performance. The mind control facility runs these students through the same narrative beats repeatedly to perfect their execution of their assigned tropes. The school's name itself is a clue. It's named after James Woods, an actor who plays characters. The facility is literally named after someone whose job is to perform roles, to act out scripts, to embody different personalities. That's exactly what the school does to its students. It turns them into actors playing roles, except they don't know they're performing. James Woods himself appeared on Family Guy multiple times. He's aware of the show's reality. He exists both as a real person and as a character within the show's universe. He even stole Peter's identity in one episode and lived his life perfectly. An actor who can seamlessly step into someone's life and play their role. The school bearing his name is doing the same thing to students, training them to play assigned roles so well they don't realize they're performing. The building's layout supports this theory. The school has standard classrooms, but it also has areas that seem designed for psychological conditioning. There's a guidance counselor's office where students go for help, but come out acting even more like their stereotypes. There are administrative areas students aren't allowed in. There are parts of the school that appear in some episodes but not others, suggesting hidden rooms and facilities used for the mind control operations. The loudspeaker system at James Woods High broadcasts announcements constantly. Principal Shepard's voice comes over the speakers, making declarations, giving instructions, controlling information. Flow. Those announcements could easily contain subliminal messaging, audio frequencies designed to reinforce programming, commands embedded below conscious hearing that tell students how to behave, what roles to play, which tropes to embody. School assemblies are another programming opportunity. The entire student body gathers in one room, faces the stage, and receives messaging from authority figures. In one episode, there's a sex education assembly that goes horribly wrong, but everyone attends and pays attention. These assemblies are perfect for mass conditioning. Get all the subjects in one place, deliver coordinated programming, and send them back to their roles. The cafeteria serves food that could easily contain compounds affecting brain chemistry. Students eat the same terrible cafeteria food every day. Food that's consistently described as gross and unappetizing, yet they keep eating it. That food could include chemicals designed to make students more suggestible, more likely to accept their programming, less likely to question the reality of their situation. Sports programs at the school reinforce trope dynamics. The football team exists to be the popular jock bullies. The cheerleaders exist to be shallow and mean. These aren't athletic programs teaching skills and teamwork. They're role-playing exercises. Students join sports not to develop abilities, but to embody the jock or cheerleader trope. The games themselves barely matter. What matters is maintaining the social hierarchy these programs create. Drama class and theater programs are particularly suspicious. These teach students how to act, how to play characters, how to embody personalities that aren't their own. That's direct training for the mind control system. Students learn performance skills, then those skills get applied to their everyday lives. They're literally being taught to act out roles, and the school uses those same techniques to make them play their assigned tropes in the hallways. The school newspaper and media programs control the narrative within the facility. They decide what stories get told, which students get featured, how events are framed. This shapes the social reality of the school. If the newspaper says someone is popular or unpopular, that becomes truth. The media programs are propaganda tools maintaining the trope structure by constantly reinforcing who plays which role. Meg worked on the school newspaper briefly. She tried to use it to improve her social standing by writing stories and getting involved. But it didn't work. The other students on the paper either ignored her or used her work without credit. She remained in her outcast role despite contributing meaningfully. The mind control prevented her journalistic involvement from breaking her assigned trope. Tests and grades at James Woods High don't measure actual learning. We've seen students fail repeatedly with no consequences. Chris barely passes anything but stays in school. Some students are shown as smart, others as dumb, and these labels never change regardless of performance. That's because the testing system isn't evaluating knowledge. It's reinforcing roles. Smart characters stay smart. Dumb characters stay dumb because that's their trope. The school has metal detectors and security measures that do nothing. Violence happens constantly. Weapons get brought in. Dangerous situations occur regularly. Yet the security theater continues. That's because the security isn't there to protect students, it's there to create the dangerous school trope. The presence of metal detectors and guards makes the school feel edgy and dramatic, without actually preventing anything. Dating and relationships at James Woods High follow perfect TV trope patterns. Popular kids date popular kids. Nerds pine after people out of their league. Outcasts can't find partners. These aren't organic teenage relationships developing naturally, they're assigned pairings based on narrative archetypes. When someone dates outside their assigned category, the relationship immediately fails and they return to their proper trope position. Meg dated various boys throughout the show, and every relationship followed the same pattern. Brief hope, sudden disaster, return to being alone and rejected. She's trapped in the unlucky in love trope. The school won't allow her to have a successful relationship because that would conflict with her assigned role as the universal reject. Any boy who shows interest either turns out to be using her, becomes repulsed by her, or disappears from the story entirely. School dances and social events are programming reinforcement sessions. Prom, homecoming, and other dances force students to perform their roles in concentrated social settings. Popular kids arrive with dates and rule the dance floor. Outcasts either don't attend or show up alone and get humiliated. These events exist to crystallize the social hierarchy and remind everyone of their place in the trope structure. The school's interaction with parents reveals the scope of the program. Parents like Peter and Lois attend school meetings and events, but they never question the bizarre things happening there. They never investigate why their children aren't learning or advancing. They accept the school's dysfunction as normal. That's because the mind control extends beyond the student body. Parents are programmed to accept James Woods High as a legitimate educational institution, even when evidence suggests otherwise. Teachers have been shown doing inappropriate things with students. There was an episode where a teacher had a relationship with Meg. This is criminal behavior that should result in arrest, termination, and school closure. But it got resolved within the episode and forgotten. The mind control wiped everyone's memory of the incident so the teacher could continue playing their role in the facility. The school library is full of books, but we never see students actually learning from them. The library exists as a set piece, a location where certain tropes play out. Nerds study there. Students make out in the back corners. But actual education through reading doesn't happen. The books are props in the performance, not tools for knowledge acquisition. Extracurricular clubs at James Woods High exist only to create more specific trope categories. There's the chess club for nerds, the debate team for overachievers, various activity groups that students join, and then perfectly embody the stereotypes associated with those activities. These clubs don't develop skills or interests. They subdivide students into more granular trope categories for better programming precision. The school has had multiple episodes featuring talent shows, competitions, and performances. These events force students to demonstrate their assigned characteristics publicly. The popular girl performs and gets applause. The loser performs and gets mocked. These aren't about celebrating student talents, they're about reinforcing the social hierarchy through public performance of tropes. Graduation ceremonies have been shown at James Woods High, but the students we follow never graduate. Other unnamed students graduate and disappear, but the main characters stay locked in high school forever. That's because those background students completed their programming and got released from the facility. Meg and Chris haven't completed their conditioning yet, so they remain trapped in the school system, repeating their roles until the mind control perfects their trope performance. The school counselor's office is where individual programming happens. Students go there supposedly for guidance and support, but they come out acting more like their assigned roles than before. The counselor isn't helping students develop healthy personalities, he's adjusting their programming, fine-tuning their behavior to better match their designated tropes. James Woods High interacts with other schools in the district, and those schools have the same trope structures. Every high school in the Family Guy universe operates identically with the same social hierarchies and character types. That suggests this isn't one isolated facility, but a network of mind control operations programming an entire generation to act out television narratives. The school exists in Quahog, a town that already has reality problems. The combination of James Woods High's mind control programming and Quahog's other anomalies creates a perfect storm of narrative control. Students are programmed to play tropes at school, then go home to families and a town that reinforce those same patterns. There's no escape from the conditioning because it permeates every aspect of their environment. James Woods Regional High School is a factory producing human beings who perfectly embody television character archetypes. Every student is a walking trope, programmed through psychological conditioning, chemical intervention, and environmental control to play assigned roles in an endless high school drama. Meg will always be the loser, Connie will always be the popular girl, Chris will always be the lovable idiot, and every other student will continue performing their designated character type forever. The school isn't preparing them for life after graduation because there is no life after graduation. There's only the eternal performance of their assigned roles in a mind control facility disguised as an educational institution. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that the Pawtucket Brewery is poisoning Quahog with a memory-wiping beer formula. The Pawtucket Brewery is not just making beer. When you examine what happens to people who drink Pawtucket Patriot Ale, when you track the memory problems plaguing every resident of Quahog, when you notice how the brewery remains operational despite countless scandals and disasters, the evidence becomes undeniable. The Pawtucket Brewery is deliberately poisoning the entire town with a memory-wiping formula disguised as beer, and they've been doing it for decades. Peter Griffin works at the Pawtucket Brewery and drinks their beer constantly. He forgets major life events all the time. He forgets people he's met, things he's done, conversations he's had. In one episode, he remembers something, then 2 episodes later, he has no memory of it. His brain is Swiss cheese full of holes where memories should be. That's not natural forgetfulness or stupidity. That's chemical memory erasure from drinking poisoned beer every single day for years. Look at what Pawtucket Patriot Ale does to people. Every major character in Quahog drinks it regularly. Peter drinks it at home and at the Drunken Clam. Joe drinks it. Quagmire drinks it. Cleveland drank it for years before moving away. Lois drinks it. Even teenagers and young adults in the town drink Pawtucket Patriot. It's the default beer everywhere in Quahog. Every bar serves it, every store stocks it, every home has it in the fridge. The brewery has achieved complete market saturation, which means they're poisoning the entire population. The memory problems in Quahog are not random. Characters forget deaths. Peter has died multiple times in various episodes, and other characters either don't remember or act like it never happened. Brian died, the family got a new dog, then Brian came back and everyone forgot the replacement dog ever existed. People die and resurrect and nobody questions it because the memory-wiping beer erases their recollection of the deaths. They wake up each day, drink their Pawtucket Patriot, and their memories reset to whatever the brewery's formula dictates. The brewery itself has been involved in multiple scandals that should have destroyed the company. In one episode, it's revealed that Pawtucket Patriot Ale is a stolen recipe from Duff Beer. This is massive corporate theft that should result in lawsuits, criminal charges, and the company being shut down. But nothing happens. The scandal gets exposed, people find out, then everyone forgets and keeps drinking Pawtucket Patriot. The memory-wiping formula protects the brewery by erasing public memory of their crimes. Peter has worked at the brewery in various capacities for years. He's been a safety inspector, a regular employee, he's been fired and rehired multiple times. He's seen the inside operations of the facility. He's been present during accidents and cover-ups. Yet he never blows the whistle on anything seriously wrong. That's because his constant exposure to the beer keeps him compliant. The memory-wiping formula doesn't just erase memories, it suppresses the impulse to question or investigate. Workers at the brewery drink the product they make, which keeps them from realizing what they're producing. The brewery has had multiple disasters. Explosions, chemical spills, workplace accidents that kill people. In one episode, the entire brewery explodes. The building is destroyed, people die. It's a catastrophic industrial accident. Next episode, the brewery is perfectly fine and operating normally. Nobody mentions the explosion. Nobody questions how it got rebuilt so fast. That's because everyone drank their Pawtucket Patriot after the disaster and forgot it happened. The brewery can commit any atrocity and the evidence disappears from people's minds within days. The formula itself must be incredibly sophisticated. It doesn't erase all memories, which would be obvious and cause people to seek help. Instead, it selectively targets specific types of memories. Traumatic events get erased, scandals disappear. Anything that would threaten the brewery's operation or Quahog's status quo gets wiped. But mundane daily memories remain, so people feel like their minds are working normally. They remember going to work, talking to friends, daily routines. They just can't remember the important things that should change their behavior. The beer's effects explain why nobody in Quahog ages. The same formula that wipes memories might also affect biological processes. If the chemical can target and erase specific neural pathways, it could also interfere with cellular aging. Everyone in town drinks the beer, and everyone stays the same age indefinitely. The brewery isn't just controlling minds, they're controlling time itself through biochemical manipulation of the entire population. Think about the distribution network. Pawtucket Patriot Ale is available everywhere in Quahog, but almost nowhere outside the town. When characters travel to other places, they drink different beer. When people from outside Quahog visit, they sometimes comment on how weird the town is. That's because visitors aren't drinking the memory-wiping formula. They can perceive the absurdity of Quahog because their memories are intact. Residents can't because they're constantly dosed with the chemical that makes them forget anything abnormal. The Drunken Clam serves exclusively Pawtucket Patriot Ale. Peter and his friends drink there every evening, consuming massive quantities of the poisoned beer. They sit in the same booth, have similar conversations repeatedly, and never question why their lives follow the same patterns. The brewery ensures its product is the only option at the most popular bar in town because that's where they can most efficiently dose the male population. Men drink more beer than women on average, and men who gather at bars drink even more. Targeting the Drunken Clam guarantees high consumption rates among a key demographic. The brewery's ownership and management have changed multiple times in the show, but the product never changes. Different people run the company, different executives make decisions, but Pawtucket Patriot Ale remains identical. That's because the memory-wiping formula is built into the core recipe. It's not something added by current management, it's fundamental to what Pawtucket Patriot Ale is. Every owner discovers the formula and chooses to continue using it because the profits from having a captive addicted customer base who can't remember scandals are too good to give up. Peter's friendship group demonstrates the formula's effectiveness perfectly. These four men have been friends for decades of episodes. They drink together constantly, yet they forget major events in each other's lives. Joe's paralysis sometimes gets forgotten, then remembered. Cleveland left for years, and when he came back, everyone acted like he'd never left. Quagmire has admitted to horrible crimes, and the others forget by the next episode. Their friendships survive because the beer erases anything that would damage their relationships. The formula affects different people in different ways based on consumption levels. Peter drinks the most and has the worst memory problem. He forgets things immediately sometimes. His brain is so saturated with the chemical that he can barely retain new information. Lois drinks less and has somewhat better memory, though she still forgets major family events. The kids drink the least and have the clearest memories, but even they show signs of the effects as they consume more of the product over time. Pawtucket Patriot Ale is marketed as a local patriotic brand. The name invokes American patriotism and local pride. That's deliberate psychological manipulation. By connecting the beer to patriotism and community identity, the brewery makes drinking it feel like a civic duty. Quahog residents drink Pawtucket Patriot because they think it supports local business and expresses hometown pride. They don't realize they're voluntarily dosing themselves with a memory-erasing chemical weapon. The brewery has political connections that protect it from investigation. Mayor Adam West was shown drinking Pawtucket Patriot regularly. He had the most scrambled brain of anyone in Quahog, acting completely insane most of the time. That wasn't natural eccentricity. That was severe neurological damage from years of drinking the poisoned beer. The brewery kept the mayor addicted and mentally compromised so he wouldn't interfere with their operation or authorize investigations into their product. When the brewery got exposed for stealing the Duff beer recipe, the resolution came through a tour of the facility and some corporate maneuvering. Peter toured the brewery and saw the production process. He witnessed how the beer gets made, but he never questioned what ingredients go into it or asked for detailed formula information. The brewery let him see the mechanical process while hiding the chemical composition. He saw brewing equipment and bottling lines, not the secret lab where they develop and refine the memory-wiping compound. The beer's addictive properties keep people consuming it despite warning signs. Characters on Family Guy continue drinking Pawtucket Patriot even after bad experiences. Peter has gotten sick from drinking too much. He's had alcohol poisoning. He's done terrible things while drunk. Yet he keeps drinking the same beer every single day. That's not just alcoholism, that's chemical dependency on the memory wiping formula. The compound creates addiction beyond normal alcohol dependency. It makes people physically and psychologically need the beer to function. Pawtucket Patriot is cheaper than other beers in Quahog. The brewery prices it low enough that everyone can afford to drink it constantly. They're not maximizing profit per unit, they're maximizing consumption across the population. The goal is getting as many people as possible drinking as much as possible. Lower prices mean higher volume, which means more people dosed with the memory-erasing chemical. The brewery sacrifices profit margins to achieve total population control. The formula's effects accumulate over time. People who've lived in Quahog for years have worse memory problems than recent arrivals. Peter has lived there his entire life and his memory is destroyed. Characters who move to Quahog start normal but gradually develop memory issues as they consume more Pawtucket Patriot. The chemical builds up in the brain, creating permanent neurological changes that get worse with continued exposure. Children in Quahog show early signs of memory problems from secondhand exposure. Their parents drink the beer, the chemical gets into their systems through various routes, and the kids start forgetting things too. Meg and Chris both have memory inconsistencies across episodes. They forget major life events just like the adults. The brewery is poisoning multiple generations, ensuring that people who grow up in Quahog are preconditioned to accept the memory-wiping effects as normal. The brewery conducts no visible quality control or safety testing. We've never seen health inspectors checking the facility. There's no regulatory oversight shown. The brewery operates with complete freedom to put whatever chemicals they want into their product, because everyone who should be regulating them is drinking the memory-wiping beer and forgetting to do their jobs. Peter's position at the brewery is strategic for the company. By employing local residents, they ensure those people will defend the brewery against criticism. Workers won't report problems because they're dosed more heavily than regular consumers. Peter drinks at work, gets product samples, takes beer home. He's consuming multiple times the normal dose every single day. His brain is so compromised he could never realize what the brewery is doing, even if evidence was put directly in front of him. The beer's formula explains Quahog's acceptance of impossible events. Alien invasions happen and everyone forgets. Time travel occurs and nobody questions it. Reality breaks down repeatedly and residents just shrug. That's because the memory-wiping beer is calibrated to erase anything that contradicts normal reality. When something impossible happens, people drink their Pawtucket Patriot and their brains literally delete the memory because it doesn't fit acceptable parameters. Other beer brands exist in Quahog, but they're not as widely available or popular. The brewery has used its market dominance to squeeze out competition. Any bar or store that stops carrying Pawtucket Patriot loses the majority of their customers because those customers are addicted to the specific formula. The brewery has created chemical dependence across the entire town, which gives them monopoly power. Competition can't survive because they can't break people's addiction to the memory-wiping formula. The brewery's logo and branding are everywhere in Quahog. Billboards, signs, promotional materials plaster the town. That's not just advertising, that's psychological reinforcement. The constant visual presence of Pawtucket Patriot branding keeps the beer in people's minds. When they see the logo dozens of times per day, drinking becomes automatic behavior. The branding triggers the addiction, reminding people they need their next dose of the memory-erasing formula. Pawtucket Patriot has been around for generations in Quahog. The brewery is a historical institution in the town. That means the memory-wiping formula has been affecting the population for decades or longer. Multiple generations have grown up drinking this beer and raising children in a town where collective memory is destroyed. The effects compound across time, creating a population that has no reliable historical memory because their parents and grandparents also had their memories wiped. The brewery survived Prohibition, which suggests powerful connections or illegal operations. During Prohibition, all breweries should have shut down, but somehow Pawtucket Brewery made it through and resumed operation afterward. They either had government protection or were operating illegally with impunity. Either way, it demonstrates the brewery has always existed outside normal legal constraints. They've never followed rules, which makes it entirely plausible they'd put memory-wiping chemicals in beer without concern for legality or ethics. Peter has witnessed coworkers get injured at the brewery. Industrial accidents happen regularly. People get hurt, sometimes seriously. But there's never outrage, never investigations, never reforms. That's because injured workers drink Pawtucket Patriot and forget how they got hurt. The brewery faces no liability because victims can't remember enough details to file complaints or lawsuits. The memory-wiping formula protects the company from consequences of their negligence. The beer contains alcohol which already affects memory, making it the perfect delivery system for additional memory-wiping chemicals. People expect to forget things when drinking alcohol. Blackouts and hazy memories are considered normal drinking side effects. The brewery hides their memory-erasing formula behind the expected effects of alcohol consumption. Nobody questions losing memories while drinking because that's supposed to happen. The formula amplifies and redirects the natural memory suppression alcohol causes, targeting specific types of memories while leaving others intact. Quahog's hospital never reports unusual neurological problems, despite the entire town having severe memory issues. Doctors should notice patterns of memory loss and cognitive decline, but they don't because the doctors drink Pawtucket Patriot too. The medical establishment is compromised by the same chemical affecting everyone else. They can't diagnose the problem because they can't remember their patient's symptoms from appointment to appointment. The brewery sponsors local events and sports teams. They donate to schools and charities. This creates positive associations with the brand that override concerns about the product. When the brewery is seen as a good corporate citizen supporting the community, people dismiss worries about their beer. The memory-wiping formula makes them forget any negative information while the positive PR sticks. The brewery actively cultivates an image that makes people defend them against criticism. Pawtucket Patriot bottles and cans are designed for maximum consumption. Large sizes, multi-packs, and bulk deals encourage people to buy and drink more. The packaging isn't just convenient, it's engineered to increase dosage. The more beer people consume, the more memory-wiping chemical enters their system, the more controlled they become. The brewery has optimized every aspect of their product and distribution to maximize population exposure to their formula. Characters in Quahog sometimes have moments of clarity where they realize something is wrong. They notice their memory problems or question why things don't make sense. But these moments pass quickly, and they forget they ever had concerns. That's the formula working in real time. When someone starts to break free from the chemical's effects, drinking more beer resets them. The brewery has created a self-maintaining system where the product's effects drive continued consumption, which maintains the effects indefinitely. The Pawtucket Brewery has turned Quahog into a living laboratory where they test the effects of long-term memory manipulation on an entire population. They've perfected a formula that erases specific memories while leaving others intact, keeps people chemically dependent, and protects the brewery from legal and social consequences. Every resident of Quahog is a test subject who voluntarily consumes poison daily, never remembering the harm it causes because the poison itself destroys the memories of that harm. The brewery owns the town not through economic power but through neurological control, one beer at a time. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that Channel 5 News orchestrates every disaster in Quahog for ratings. Channel 5 News Station orchestrates every disaster in Quahog for ratings. Channel 5 News is not just reporting on disasters in Quahog. When you examine how quickly they arrive at every catastrophic event, when you track the patterns of who benefits from the chaos, when you notice how perfectly positioned they always are to capture footage, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Channel 5 News station is deliberately orchestrating every disaster in Quahog to boost their ratings, and they've been doing it for years. Tom Tucker is obsessed with ratings. He's shown this constantly throughout the series. He cares more about his career and viewership numbers than he cares about journalism or truth. In multiple episodes, he's demonstrated that he'll do anything to stay on top as the #1 news anchor. His entire identity revolves around being the face of Channel 5 News. That's not just professional pride, that's dangerous obsession. When someone is that fixated on ratings, they'll eventually cross the line from reporting news to creating it. Look at how fast Channel 5 arrives at disaster scenes. Every single time something catastrophic happens in Quahog, Tom Tucker and his crew are already there with cameras rolling. Explosions happen, and within seconds there's a news crew filming. Shootings occur, and Trisha Takanawa is on the scene before police arrive. Buildings collapse, and Channel 5 has aerial footage from their helicopter immediately. That's not good journalism, that's prior knowledge. They're not responding to events, they're present because they knew the events would happen. They knew because they planned them. Trisha Takanawa is always in the exact right location at the exact right time. She's been at the scene of every major incident in Quahog for years. Car crashes, murders, fires. She's there with her microphone and cameraman ready to go. The odds of one reporter accidentally being present for that many disasters are astronomical. She's not lucky, she's positioned. Channel 5 stations her at locations where they've planned disasters to occur. She stands in front of buildings they're about to blow up. She interviews people they're about to kill. She's the face of their orchestrated chaos. The news station has resources that make no sense for a local news channel. They have helicopters, multiple camera crews, sophisticated broadcasting equipment, reporters all over town simultaneously. Local news stations in small cities don't have those kinds of budgets. Network news has those resources, but Channel 5 is supposed to be a local Quahog station. Where does their money come from? It comes from ratings. The more disasters they cover, the more viewers they get, the more advertising revenue flows in. But they took it further. They realized they could guarantee exclusive coverage by creating the disasters themselves. Diane Simmons proves that Channel 5 personnel are capable of murder. She killed multiple people in a premeditated murder spree. She planned executions and carried them out without hesitation. A news anchor from Channel 5 became a serial killer, and everyone acted shocked. But this wasn't an isolated incident of one person snapping. This was someone who worked in an environment where orchestrating violence was normal. She learned to plan and execute murders because that's what her employer does. The only difference is she did it for personal revenge instead of ratings. Channel 5 covered Diane's murders extensively. They reported on the killings, interviewed witnesses, built massive coverage around the story. Then it was revealed their own anchor was the killer. That should have destroyed the station's credibility. There should have been investigations into the workplace culture that produced a murderer. But nothing happened. The story faded and Channel 5 continued operating normally. That's because revealing Diane as the killer was part of their plan. They orchestrated her murders, then orchestrated her exposure, getting double the ratings from the same story arc. Tom Tucker showed no real remorse when Diane was exposed. He was shocked in the moment, but quickly moved on and continued his career without missing a beat. His co-anchor for years turned out to be a serial killer, and he just kept reading the news. That's not normal human behavior. That's the behavior of someone who knew what was happening. He knew Diane was killing people because Channel 5 approved it. When she got caught, he played his role as the shocked colleague while internally understanding this was always the plan. The station has inside information on everything. They know about crimes before police do. They have details about incidents that shouldn't be public. They report on events with specifics that could only come from direct involvement. When there's a shooting, they know the shooter's identity immediately. When there's an explosion, they know what caused it before investigators arrive. That information doesn't come from good journalism, it comes from planning the events. Channel 5 News has been involved in creating stories directly. In various episodes, Tom Tucker and other station personnel have engaged in unethical behavior to generate content. They've manipulated situations, created conflict, and staged scenarios for ratings. This is established behavior. They've already proven they'll cross ethical lines for viewership. Orchestrating disasters is just the logical extreme of behavior they've already demonstrated. The news station has connections to every institution in Quahog. They have relationships with the police department, the mayor's office, local businesses, schools, and hospitals. These connections give them access and information, but they also give them opportunity. They know security schedules. They know when buildings are vulnerable. They know where people will be at specific times. This knowledge lets them plan disasters with precision, ensuring maximum impact and coverage while minimizing risk to their own personnel. Every disaster in Quahog follows patterns that benefit Channel 5. Events happen during prime coverage hours when viewership is highest. Disasters occur in locations that provide good camera angles and dramatic backdrops. The scale of events is always big enough to be newsworthy but controlled enough that the town recovers quickly. These aren't random occurrences, they're engineered content designed for maximum ratings impact. The chicken fights between Peter Griffin and Ernie provide perfect examples. These extended violent battles destroy huge sections of Quahog and last for several minutes. Channel 5 always has comprehensive footage of these fights. They capture every moment from multiple angles. They have ground cameras, aerial shots, and perfect positioning throughout. That level of coverage requires preparation. They knew the fights would happen because they arranged them. They probably pay Ernie to attack Peter at specific times and locations that maximize coverage opportunities. Channel 5 has never been held accountable for their failures in journalism ethics. They've reported false information, manipulated stories, and engaged in sensationalism constantly. In a normal city, regulatory agencies would investigate and fine them. Journalists would expose their practices. Competing stations would call them out. But none of that happens because they've made themselves too powerful. The ratings from their disaster coverage give them influence over local politics and business. They're untouchable because everyone in Quahog needs them. Joyce Kinney demonstrated the station's willingness to destroy people for ratings. She exposed Lois Griffin's past as an adult film actress. She researched Lois's history, found embarrassing information, and broadcast it knowing it would humiliate her and damage her family. That's not news reporting. That's a targeted attack. Joyce did this purely for ratings, and the station supported her completely. If they'll ruin someone's life for viewership, they'll absolutely orchestrate disasters. The station's helicopter appears at every major incident instantly. Helicopters don't scramble that fast. Getting a news helicopter airborne to the scene and positioned for optimal footage takes time. But Channel 5's helicopter is always already in the air at the perfect location. That's because they know where to be before events happen. The helicopter is pre-positioned above areas where they've planned disasters. When the event starts, they're already filming. Tom Tucker's personal behavior reveals his moral bankruptcy. He's vain, selfish, and completely immoral. He cares only about his appearance and career. He's shown no genuine empathy for disaster victims. When reporting on tragedies, he performs concern but shows no real emotion. That's because he knows the victims are casualties of ratings warfare. He can't feel bad for them because he approved creating the situations that harmed them. The news station profits massively from Quahog's chaos. Advertising rates increase when ratings are high. Disaster coverage brings the highest ratings. Channel 5 has built their entire business model around catastrophic events. They need disasters to maintain revenue. When natural disasters don't occur frequently enough, they manufacture them. It's basic economics. They've found a product that sells, and they've vertically integrated by controlling both production and distribution. Channel 5 has technical capabilities that suggest coordination with outside organizations. Their broadcasting equipment is extremely sophisticated. They have satellite capabilities, digital editing suites, and production technology that exceeds what local stations normally possess. This equipment requires significant investment. That money comes from somewhere, and it's not just local advertising. They likely have backing from entities that benefit from keeping Quahog in chaos. Government agencies, research organizations, or corporations studying disaster response could all be funding. Channel 5's operations in exchange for exclusive footage and data. The station's coverage always frames disasters in ways that prevent real investigation. They report events, show footage, interview survivors, but they never dig deeper into causes or patterns. A real news organization would notice that Quahog has an impossible number of disasters and investigate why. Channel 5 never does this because real investigation would expose their role. They keep coverage surface level, focused on immediate drama rather than systemic analysis. Every reporter at Channel 5 shows sociopathic traits. They report on horrible events with no visible emotional impact. Trisha Takanawa stands in front of burning buildings, describing casualties with the same tone she uses for weather reports. Tom Tucker announces deaths and disasters with a smile. These aren't hardened journalists who've learned to compartmentalize. These are people who feel nothing because they know the events are staged. They're actors performing concern, not humans reacting to tragedy. The station has never had a major equipment failure during disaster coverage. Their cameras always work. Their broadcasts never cut out. Their reporters are never injured despite being at dangerous scenes. That's statistically impossible. When you're covering real unpredictable disasters, equipment fails, signal gets lost, people get hurt. But Channel 5 has perfect coverage every time because they control the disasters. They ensure their equipment and personnel are positioned safely while making it look like they're in danger. Channel 5's competition has disappeared over the years. Other news stations existed in Quahog early on, but they've vanished. Channel 5 has achieved complete media dominance in the town. That doesn't happen through normal market competition. They eliminated rivals by outperforming them on disaster coverage. No other station could match their response times or footage quality because no other station knew when and where disasters would occur. Channel 5 monopolized catastrophe coverage by creating the catastrophes. The station has relationships with criminals and dangerous people in Quahog. They interview mob figures, terrorists, and violent offenders with remarkable access. These people agree to appear on camera and discuss their crimes openly. That access requires trust. Criminals don't trust journalists normally, but they trust Channel 5 because the station helps them. Channel 5 likely coordinates with criminal elements to stage certain disasters, providing criminals with opportunities for theft or violence while ensuring the station gets exclusive coverage. Tom Tucker's son Jake works at the station, showing this is a family operation. Tom is bringing his son into the business of orchestrated disaster. He's training the next generation to continue the practice. This isn't just a current strategy, it's a long-term institutional approach to news coverage. The station plans to continue creating disasters indefinitely, passing the operation down through families of complicit journalists. Channel 5 has covered government experiments and military operations in Quahog. These stories should be classified or at least restricted, but the station reports on them freely. That suggests coordination with government agencies. The station might be providing a cover story function for experiments. When the government wants to test something in Quahog, Channel 5 frames it as a random disaster. The public accepts the news explanation and doesn't question whether events were deliberately caused. The station's editing and production capabilities let them manipulate footage. They can edit scenes to hide their involvement, remove evidence of coordination, and construct narratives that deflect suspicion. When disasters happen, Channel 5 controls the visual record. They decide what footage airs and what gets buried. This gives them power to shape reality for Quahog residents. People believe what they see on the news, and Channel 5 controls what they see. Every major disaster has benefited Channel 5 directly. The nuclear incident brought them ratings. The flood coverage increased viewership. Violence in the streets gave them dramatic footage. Each catastrophe has made the station more powerful and profitable. This pattern is too consistent to be coincidence. They're engineering an environment that feeds their business model, creating a cycle where disaster leads to ratings, which leads to resources, which enables more disasters. Channel 5's broadcasts reach beyond Quahog. They're syndicated and viewed in other areas. This means the disasters they stage in Quahog bring them national attention and revenue. The bigger the disaster, the wider their footage spreads. They're not just serving local audiences, they're using Quahog as a production facility for disaster content that gets distributed across media networks. The town is their studio, and residents are unwitting actors in productions designed for mass consumption. The news station has survived scandals that would destroy normal media organizations. Between Diane's murders, Joyce's ethical violations, and Tom's various controversies, Channel 5 should have lost all credibility. But their ratings never significantly decline. Viewers keep watching because they're the only source for disaster coverage, and disasters keep happening. The station has made itself indispensable by ensuring a constant supply of the content only they can provide. Channel 5 personnel show no fear when covering dangerous situations. They walk into active shooter scenarios, stand next to explosives, and position themselves in harm's way without hesitation. Real journalists in those situations show fear because they're in actual danger. Channel 5 reporters show no fear because they know they're safe. The disasters are controlled. The station has ensured their people won't be harmed because they planned every detail of the events they're covering. The station's archives must contain evidence of their operations. years of disaster footage, planning documents, communications with coordinators. But these archives are never accessed by investigators or external parties. Channel 5 has complete control over their records. They can destroy evidence, manipulate files, and ensure nothing incriminating ever surfaces. Their institutional control over information makes them virtually immune to exposure. Quahog residents trust Channel 5 completely. Despite endless evidence of media manipulation, they watch the news, believe everything reported, and never question how one station always has perfect coverage of every disaster. That trust is cultivated through years of psychological conditioning. Channel 5 has positioned themselves as the authoritative voice on reality in Quahog. When they say something happened a certain way, people believe it because questioning Channel 5 means questioning your understanding of your entire town. The station operates with complete impunity because they control the narrative about themselves. When they do wrong, they decide how to report it. When they face criticism, they frame the critics as unreliable. They've built a self-protecting system where they're simultaneously the actors, the reporters, and the judges of their own behavior. Channel 5. News station has transformed from a media organization into a disaster production company that happens to report on the chaos they create. Every explosion, every shooting, every catastrophe in Quahog is content they've engineered, filmed, and broadcast for profit, turning an entire town into a ratings-driven nightmare where news doesn't report reality, it manufactures it. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that the Quahog Mall exists outside normal space as a portal to other Fox cartoons. The Quahog Mall is not a normal shopping center. When you examine the crossovers that happen there, when you track which characters from other shows appear in that specific location, when you notice how space and reality bend inside those walls, the evidence becomes overwhelming. The Quahog Mall exists outside normal space as a dimensional nexus that connects to other Fox animated universes, and it's been functioning as a portal for years. The Simpson family appeared in Quahog. This actually happened. Homer, Marge, Bart, Lisa, and Maggie came to Quahog and interacted with the Griffin family. They met at multiple locations, but the crossover involved characters from completely different shows occupying the same physical space. That shouldn't be possible. The Simpsons live in Springfield, which exists in a different reality than Quahog. These are separate animated universes with different rules, different timelines, different everything. Yet somehow these families met and interacted. The mall is where these dimensional barriers are thinnest, allowing crossover events to occur. Think about how malls function in the real world. They're commercial spaces where hundreds of stores exist under one roof. Multiple businesses, multiple brands, all sharing the same building. The Quahog Mall takes this concept and extends it dimensionally. Just like regular malls contain different stores, the Quahog Mall contains different realities. Each section connects to different animated universes. Walk through one entrance and you're in the Family Guy universe. Walk through another and you've crossed into the Simpsons world, or American Dad, or any other Fox animated property. The mall's layout makes no sense and changes constantly. Characters visit the Quahog Mall in different episodes, and the interior is different every time. Stores appear and disappear. The size changes. Sometimes it's a small local mall, sometimes it's a massive complex with hundreds of shops. The floor plan is impossible to map because it's not bound by three-dimensional space. The mall exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously, and the version you see depends on which dimensional frequency you're vibrating at when you enter. Peter encounters people at the mall who shouldn't exist in his reality. He's run into celebrities, historical figures, and characters from other shows while shopping. These aren't hallucinations or cartoon randomness. These are actual entities from parallel dimensions who've crossed through the mall's dimensional barriers. The mall is a neutral meeting ground where beings from different realities can interact temporarily before returning to their own universe. American Dad had a direct crossover with Family Guy. Stan Smith and his family met the Griffin. The two shows exist in the same network but supposedly different universes. Stan works for the CIA in Langley Falls, Virginia. Peter lives in Quahog, Rhode Island. These are distinct locations with distinct realities. Yet the families met and spent time together. That crossover was possible because both families access the dimensional nexus. The mall creates connection points between Fox animated universes, allowing characters to cross over when the barriers weaken. The stores inside the Quahog Mall are impossible. There are shops that sell products that don't exist. There are businesses that couldn't survive economically. There are entire sections of the mall that seem to appear only when the plot needs them. That's because these stores aren't all from the same universe. Some shops exist in the Family Guy reality, others are bleeding through from the Simpsons universe, others from American Dad, others from Bob's Burgers or King of the Hill. The mall is a collection of commercial spaces from multiple Fox animated dimensions, all occupying the same building. Characters behave differently at the mall than they do elsewhere in Quahog. Their personalities shift slightly. Their awareness changes. They sometimes break the fourth wall more easily or reference things that shouldn't exist in their reality. That's because the mall's dimensional properties affect consciousness. When you're standing at the intersection of multiple realities, your mind can perceive things from different universes. Characters become more meta-aware at the mall because they're literally standing between dimensions. The mall has survived catastrophic events that should have destroyed it. Quahog has been blown up, flooded, and devastated multiple times. Other buildings get destroyed and need rebuilding. But the mall always remains intact. That's because it doesn't fully exist in Quahog's physical space. The building has dimensional anchors in multiple universes simultaneously. When Quahog gets destroyed, the mall exists just as much in Springfield or Langley, Falls, or wherever else. Destroy the Family Guy version and it still exists in other dimensions, then reasserts itself back into Quahog when reality resets. Time works strangely at the mall. Characters can spend what feels like hours shopping, then leave and find that only minutes have passed outside. Or they enter for a quick errand and emerge to find hours gone. Temporal flow is inconsistent because time moves differently in different animated universes. The Simpsons time moves differently than Family Guy time, which moves differently than American Dad time. At the mall where all these timelines intersect, temporal coherence breaks down. You might spend Simpson time inside while Family Guy time continues outside. The mall's parking lot is another dimensional anomaly. Characters always find parking instantly, no matter how crowded it should be. The parking lot seems infinite despite the building having a fixed footprint. Cars disappear and reappear in different spots. That's because the parking lot exists in folded space. It's bigger on the inside than the outside, containing parking spaces from multiple dimensional iterations of the same mall. You park your car in one universe's version of the lot, and it's accessible from all versions simultaneously. Other Fox animated characters have been spotted in background shots at the Quahog Mall. Brief appearances, easy to miss, but they're there. Cleveland Brown worked for Family Guy, then got his own show, then came back. His ability to move between shows demonstrates that Fox animated properties are permeable to each other. The mall is the mechanism enabling this permeability. It's the backstage area where characters from different shows can cross over without disrupting their individual narratives. The mall's bathrooms are particularly strange. Multiple episodes feature weird events happening in mall bathrooms. Characters encounter impossible things there, have bizarre conversations, experience temporal anomalies. Bathrooms are liminal spaces in regular reality, areas between destinations where normal rules loosen. In a dimensional nexus like the Quahog Mall, bathrooms become even more liminal. They're spaces between spaces, the thinnest parts of the dimensional barrier where crossing over is easiest. The food court serves food from different realities. The restaurants there offer items that don't match their usual menus. Characters order things that shouldn't exist in their universe. That's because the food court sources from multiple dimensions. The Chinese restaurant might be serving food from the Simpsons Springfield, the burger place from Bob's Burgers universe, the taco stand from American Dad's Langley Falls. The food court is literally serving meals from across the Fox animated multiverse. Peter has had interactions at the mall that he doesn't remember later. He'll reference meeting someone or seeing something there, but the details are fuzzy. Other characters have no memory of events Peter describes. That's dimensional bleed-through being incompletely integrated into memory. When you experience something at the intersection of multiple realities, your brain struggles to process and retain it. The memories exist in a quantum state, simultaneously real and unreal depending on which dimensional frequency your consciousness is tuned to. The mall's security is aware of the dimensional properties. Security guards at the Quahog Mall have shown unusual knowledge and capabilities. They appear where they're needed instantly. They seem to know things they shouldn't. They manage crowds that should be unmanageable. That's because mall security is trained to work in multi-dimensional space. They can perceive and navigate between the different universal layers. They're not just preventing shoplifting, they're managing dimensional traffic and preventing unauthorized crossovers. Stewie has built advanced technology using parts he bought at the mall. He's constructed time machines, dimensional portals, and reality-altering devices using components from mall stores. That technology shouldn't be available at a suburban shopping center, but the Quahog Mall has stores from universes with more advanced technology. Stewie unknowingly shops at stores that exist partially in futuristic or alternate dimensions, buying components that shouldn't exist in the Family Guy universe's current timeline. The mall hosts events that attract massive crowds from impossible distances. Sales and promotions bring people from all over, far more than Quahog's population could account for. That's because these crowds aren't just from Quahog, they're shoppers from other Fox animated universes who've crossed through the mall's dimensional barriers. When there's a big sale, beings from The Simpsons, American Dad, and other shows can cross over to take advantage of the deals. Stores have employees who don't seem to belong in Quahog, workers who speak with different accents, reference places that don't exist in Rhode Island, or have knowledge of events from other shows. These aren't transplants or travelers, they're employees who exist primarily in other dimensions but work shifts at the mall's multi-dimensional locations. The same person might work at the Springfield Mall in the Simpsons universe and the Quahog Mall in Family Guy universe because they're actually the same mall viewed from different dimensional angles. The mall's architecture is impossible. Staircases lead to floors that shouldn't exist based on the building's external height. Hallways connect in ways that violate Euclidean geometry. Stores are bigger inside than their frontage allows. This is dimensional folding. The building's interior exists in more dimensions than its exterior. Walking through the mall, you're navigating 4 or 5-dimensional space, compressed to appear 3-dimensional. The architecture reflects its true multi-dimensional nature. Music playing over the mall's speaker system sometimes includes songs from other universes. Characters hear melodies they don't recognize, references to events that never happened in their timeline, advertisements for products that don't exist in their reality. The PA system broadcasts across all dimensional iterations of the mall simultaneously, creating an audio mashup of content from different Fox animated universes. The mall's grand opening and history are vague and inconsistent. Different characters remember it being built at different times. Some recall it existing for decades, others think it's relatively new. That's because the mall doesn't have a single timeline. It was built in multiple universes at different points, and all those histories exist simultaneously. Ask about the mall's past, and you'll get different answers depending on which dimensional layer of memory you're accessing. Cleveland's return to Quahog after his own show ended demonstrates how the mall functions as a transition point. He left Family Guy, existed in his own show universe for years, then came back. That transition required crossing dimensional boundaries. The Cleveland show existed as a separate reality from Family Guy, and Cleveland navigated between them. The mall provides the infrastructure for these crossovers, the physical location where animated characters can shift between their different show realities. The Quahog Mall has a movie theater that shows films from different universes. Characters watch movies that don't exist in their timeline, see actors who aren't famous in their world, experience narratives that reference events from other Fox shows. The theater is showing films from across the multiverse, playing different dimensional versions of movies simultaneously. Which film you see depends on which reality layer you're most attuned to when you enter the screening room. Meg has had some of her most significant character moments at the mall. Her social interactions there, her attempts to fit in, her humiliations and small victories. The mall is where her character goes through changes that don't stick in other locations. That's because Meg at the mall is simultaneously Meg from multiple timeline iterations. Different versions of her from different episodes and seasons overlap at the mall. The character development that happens there affects multiple Megs across multiple realities, but doesn't always transfer back to the prime timeline. The mall's clearance section contains items that are anachronistic, products from the future, discontinued items that were never released, merchandise from shows that don't exist. These clearance racks are where dimensional overflow gets dumped. When items cross over from other universes accidentally, they end up in clearance. The mall sells them cheap to clear out the dimensional clutter and maintain stable portal function. Electronic stores at the mall sell devices with impossible capabilities, TVs that pick up channels from other universes, phones that can call numbers that don't exist in the Family Guy reality, computers with internet access to websites from the Simpsons world. These aren't manufacturing defects, they're products from other dimensions being sold at the multi-universal mall. The electronics work fine in their native dimensions but have strange properties when used in the Family Guy universe. The mall's customer service desk handles complaints that don't make sense. People return products purchased in other dimensions. They complain about stores that don't exist in this version of the mall. They demand refunds for items that haven't been sold yet in this timeline. Customer service can handle these complaints because they're trained to work across dimensional boundaries. They process returns from the Simpsons universe, exchanges from American Dad universe, and refunds from timelines that haven't happened yet in the Family Guy universe. Seasonal decorations at the mall appear and disappear on schedules that don't match the calendar. Christmas decorations show up in summer, Halloween displays in spring. That's because the mall is decorated according to multiple universe calendars simultaneously. Different Fox animated shows have different seasonal timelines. The Simpsons might be celebrating Christmas while Family Guy is in summer. The mall's decorations reflect all these timelines at once, creating a temporal mishmash of seasonal displays. The mall has survived every apocalypse scenario that has threatened Quahog. Nuclear war, zombie outbreaks, alien invasions, all the catastrophic events that have destroyed the town. The mall remains operational through everything. That's because apocalypses are universe-specific. When the Family Guy universe experiences catastrophe, the mall shifts its dimensional anchor to a safer universe. It continues existing in the Simpsons reality or American Dad reality, where no apocalypse is occurring, then shifts back when Family Guy resets. Peter's chicken fights with Ernie have crashed through the mall multiple times. These battles destroy huge sections of the building, tear through stores, and kill bystanders. But the mall is always perfectly restored afterward with no sign of damage. The dimensional nature of the building allows instant reconstruction. When one dimensional layer gets damaged, the mall simply emphasizes an undamaged layer from an alternate universe. The destroyed version gets phased out, and a pristine version from another dimension takes its place. The mall directory is different every time you look at it. The map shows different stores, different layouts, different anchor tenants. That's because the directory is trying to represent a multi-dimensional space on a two-dimensional map. It can't show all the stores from all the universes simultaneously, so it cycles through different dimensional views. Check the directory 5 minutes later and you're seeing the mall's layout from a different universal angle. Other animated characters shop there without anyone questioning their presence. Yellow-skinned people who look like they're from The Simpsons walk through the Quahog Mall and nobody reacts. The animation style differences that should be obvious get ignored. That's because at the mall, the dimensional barriers are so thin that people can perceive beings from other universes. The shoppers aren't hallucinations, they're actually there, physically present from their own realities. The Quahog Mall is the linchpin holding the Fox animated multiverse together. It exists simultaneously in every Fox animated show's universe, providing the stable connection point that makes crossovers possible. When characters from different shows meet, they're meeting at the mall or locations connected to it through dimensional resonance. The building is more than a shopping center, it's a multi-universal hub where the separate realities of Family Guy, The Simpsons, American Dad, and every other Fox animated property intersect and overlap. The mall doesn't exist in Quahog. It exists everywhere and nowhere. A portal disguised as a suburban shopping center where the boundaries between cartoon worlds dissolve and anything from any Fox show can walk through the door. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that the happy-go-lucky toy factory is where Lois quietly launders the Griffin family's crimes. The happy-go-lucky toy factory is not just making toys. When you examine Lois Griffin's connection to that facility, when you track the Griffin family's endless criminal activity and complete lack of legal consequences, when you notice how money flows through the Pewterschmidt family empire, the truth becomes undeniable. Lois is using the happy-go-lucky toy factory as a front operation to launder money from Griffin family crimes and erase evidence of their illegal activities. She's been doing it for years, and nobody suspects the innocent toy factory. Lois comes from the Pewterschmidt family, one of the wealthiest families in America. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, owns factories, corporations, and businesses across multiple industries. The Pewterschmidts have their hands in everything from shipping to manufacturing to international trade. They're not just rich, they're connected. They have the resources and infrastructure to move money, hide transactions, and cover up crimes. The toy factory is one small piece of their empire, but it serves a very specific purpose for Lois. The Griffin family commits crimes constantly. Peter has been involved in theft, assault, destruction of property, fraud, and dozens of other illegal activities. He's destroyed city property, stolen vehicles, assaulted people, and caused millions of dollars in damages. Lois herself has committed crimes. She's stolen from stores, been involved in illegal activities, taught Meg how to shoplift, and engaged in various forms of fraud and deception. The entire family breaks laws regularly without facing any real consequences. That's not luck. That's because someone is cleaning up their messes and making the legal problems disappear. Think about how a toy factory works as a money laundering operation. Toys are cheap to manufacture but can be sold for significant markup. You can claim you produced and sold thousands of toys when you actually made hundreds. The difference between claimed revenue and actual production cost is pure laundered money. Report that you sold 10,000 teddy bears at $20 each, but you only actually made and sold 1,000. That extra $180,000 in reported revenue can come from anywhere, including criminal activity, and it looks completely legitimate on paper. The factory has legitimate operations, which makes it perfect for hiding illegal activity. Real toys get manufactured and sold through normal channels. This creates a baseline of authentic business that shields the laundering. Inspectors see working production lines, legitimate orders, real products being shipped. They have no reason to dig deeper because the surface operation is genuine. Meanwhile, the financial records are inflated with fake sales that hide dirty money from Griffin family crimes. Lois has access to the factory through her family connections. The Pewterschmidts own it or have controlling interest. She doesn't need to explain her involvement because she's family. Nobody questions when Lois shows up at the factory or makes requests about operations. She has legitimate authority there, which gives her the freedom to manipulate records and move money without raising suspicion. Her position as a Pewterschmidt gives her cover to do whatever she needs. The Griffin family never faces consequences for their crimes despite committing them publicly. Peter has been arrested multiple times but never serves real jail time. The family has caused catastrophic damage to Quahog but never gets sued into bankruptcy. They've broken countless laws with witnesses and evidence, yet they continue living normally in their house on Spooner Street. Someone is paying off victims, settling lawsuits, bribing officials, and making problems disappear. That requires money, lots of it, and a system for moving that money without creating suspicious transactions. Lois has shown financial sophistication that Peter completely lacks. She manages the family finances, makes investment decisions, and handles complex money matters. She understands how money works in ways Peter never could. This knowledge didn't come from nowhere. She learned it growing up in the Pewterschmidt family, watching how her father's empire operates. She knows how to hide money, move funds between accounts, and create financial structures that obscure the source of income. The toy factory produces products for children, which means it deals in cash transactions, frequently. Parents buy toys with cash. Stores purchase inventory with various payment methods. Distributors handle bulk orders through complicated invoicing. This creates a natural environment for financial complexity where laundered money can hide among legitimate transactions. Nobody thinks twice about cash flow through a toy company because toys are normal consumer products with expected sales patterns. Lois has protected her family from consequences repeatedly throughout the series. When Peter does something terrible, Lois often helps cover it up or minimize damage. She's hidden evidence, lied to authorities, and used her resources to bail the family out of trouble. This isn't occasional desperate assistance. It's a pattern of systematic protection. She has systems in place to handle Griffin family disasters because they happen so frequently. The toy factory is the financial infrastructure supporting these cover-ups. The factory can employ people as legitimate workers while actually using them for other purposes. Someone who needs to disappear from a crime scene can be given a factory job with paperwork showing they were working during the time in question. Alibis get manufactured through employment records. The factory provides legitimate employment that can account for people's time and whereabouts, which is useful when covering up crimes that require alibis for multiple people. Shipping and receiving at a toy factory creates opportunities to move more than just toys. Containers leaving the factory could contain evidence that needs to be destroyed, items that need to be hidden, or materials that need to be transported secretly. Trucks arriving with raw materials could bring in things the Griffins need to hide. The constant flow of deliveries and shipments provides cover for moving anything Lois needs to make disappear. The Pewterschmidt family has shown they're willing to engage in illegal activity for profit and power. Carter has been involved in unethical business practices, exploitation, and morally questionable operations throughout the series. He's not above breaking rules when it benefits him. If Lois came to him needing help covering up Griffin family crimes, he wouldn't refuse out of moral principle. He'd help because she's family and the Pewterschmidts protect their own. The toy factory is probably one of many Pewterschmidt assets used for shady purposes. Lois has hidden capabilities that surface during crises. She can fight, she can shoot, she has skills that suburban mothers don't typically possess. These abilities suggest training and experience beyond what she admits. Someone taught her how to handle dangerous situations. The Pewterschmidt family likely provided that education, preparing her to handle the messy realities of protecting family interests. Using the toy factory for laundering is just applying those skills to financial crime instead of physical confrontation. The factory's location in or near Quahog is strategically important. Being local means Lois can access it easily without raising questions about why she's traveling. She can visit the factory, check on operations, and handle problems personally without creating a suspicious pattern of trips to distant locations. The proximity gives her control over the operation while maintaining the appearance of normal suburban life. Peter has caused financial damages that should have bankrupted the family dozens of times over. He's destroyed property worth millions, caused injuries requiring massive medical payouts, and created liability situations that should have resulted in devastating lawsuits. Yet the Griffins maintain their standard of living without apparent financial strain. That money has to come from somewhere. Lois's family wealth helps, but wealth alone isn't enough. You need active money generation to cover ongoing, massive expenses. The toy factory provides that ongoing revenue stream. The factory employs workers who don't ask questions. Manufacturing jobs attract people who need steady work and won't probe into business operations beyond their specific tasks. Production line workers assemble toys, package products, and ship orders without seeing the bigger financial picture. They have no reason to know that the company's reported sales numbers don't match actual production. They just do their jobs while management handles the money laundering above their awareness level. Lois has contacts throughout Quahog's business and social infrastructure. She knows people in government, law enforcement, business, and social circles. These relationships give her the ability to make problems disappear through favors, payoffs, and influence. When the Griffins need something handled quietly, Lois knows who to call. The toy factory provides the financial resources to pay these contacts while maintaining plausible deniability about where the money comes from. The factory's books can be manipulated to show whatever Lois needs them to show. Claim high production costs to explain why profits are lower than sales would suggest. Report equipment purchases that never happened to justify large expenditures. Create fake vendor relationships to move money to shell companies. Financial records are just numbers on paper, and Lois has the sophistication to make those numbers tell whatever story serves her purposes. Toys get recalled, discontinued, or destroyed as normal business practice. This creates legitimate reasons to dispose of inventory, which can include disposing of evidence. Destroy a batch of toys contaminated with a chemical, and nobody questions it. But that same disposal process can destroy other items that need to disappear. The factory's waste management systems provide cover for making physical evidence vanish. Lois has shown she'll do absolutely anything to protect her children. She's fought, killed, and broken laws when her family is threatened. Using a toy factory to launder money and cover crimes is mild compared to some things she's done. If manipulating financial records keeps her children out of prison or protects Peter from consequences of his stupidity, she'll do it without hesitation. The factory is just another tool in her arsenal for family protection. The Griffin children have been involved in criminal activity too. Chris has stolen things, vandalized property, and engaged in illegal behavior. Meg has committed crimes ranging from theft to assault. Stewie has built illegal weapons, created dangerous technology, and done things that would result in serious legal consequences if discovered. Every member of the family generates legal exposure that needs to be managed. The toy factory's laundering operation covers all of them. Employee paychecks at the factory can include people who don't actually work there. Lois can put anyone on the payroll and give them legitimate, documented income. This helps when someone needs an apparent source of funds that doesn't raise questions. The factory payroll is another way to move money where it needs to go while maintaining the appearance of normal business operations. The factory has probably been used for this purpose long before Lois married Peter. The Pewterschmidts likely established it as a laundering operation for their own activities, and Lois simply adapted it to handle Griffin family needs. She learned how the system works, then applied it to her own situation. The infrastructure was already in place, she just redirected it to serve her purposes. Quality control at a toy factory involves destroying defective products. Toys that don't meet standards get pulled from production and disposed of. This creates a category of legitimate waste that can hide other disposals. Anything that needs to be destroyed can be mixed with defective toy inventory and eliminated through normal quality control processes. The documentation shows legitimate business waste, not evidence destruction. Lois maintains relationships with the factory's management and key personnel. She knows the plant manager, the financial officers, the people who handle shipping and receiving. These relationships are cultivated carefully to ensure loyalty and discretion. The people running day-to-day operations understand that their real job isn't making toys, it's protecting Pewterschmidt family interests. They're well compensated for their discretion and loyalty. The factory can generate invoices and receipts for transactions that never happened. Need to explain where money came from? The factory sold toys to a distributor. Need to account for a large payment? Equipment maintenance and repairs. The factory's legitimate business operations provide endless, plausible explanations for money movement. Every transaction has documentation that looks authentic because it's created using the factory's real business systems. Lois has shown financial desperation at times, but it always resolves mysteriously. The family will be broke one episode, then suddenly have money again without clear explanation of where it came from. Peter loses jobs regularly, creating income gaps that should devastate their finances. Yet they recover quickly. The toy factory provides emergency funding when needed, laundering whatever money Lois can access through her family into clean income that can support the Griffins. The factory's products are distributed widely, creating a complex supply chain. Toys shipped to distributors, retailers, and international markets. This web of business relationships creates numerous points where money can enter or exit the system. Lois can manipulate pricing, claim sales to non-existent distributors, or inflate international orders to move money globally while maintaining the appearance of legitimate toy sales. Insurance claims are another avenue for moving money. The factory can file claims for damaged inventory, workplace accidents, or equipment failures. These claims generate legitimate insurance payouts that can exceed actual damages. The difference becomes laundered money flowing back to Lois's control. Insurance companies process claims based on documentation, and the factory creates whatever documentation serves its purposes. Lois has connections to people who need money laundering services themselves. She could be offering the factory's capabilities to others for a fee. Criminals in Quahog or beyond could pay to have their money cleaned through the toy factory's operations. This creates an additional revenue stream while building a network of people who owe Lois favors. These connections give her even more power to protect her family and handle problems. The factory's accounting systems are deliberately complex and opaque. Multiple subsidiaries, international transactions, cross-company transfers, and convoluted ownership structures make it nearly impossible for outsiders to track money flow. Auditors get lost in the maze of legitimate business complexity and never find the laundering operations hidden within. The factory's books are technically legal while serving completely illegal purposes. Lois has never been caught or seriously investigated despite the Griffin family's constant criminal activity. Law enforcement has questioned her, but nothing sticks. Prosecutors have looked at the family but never filed charges that matter. That protection comes from the laundering operation providing resources to pay lawyers, bribe officials, and settle cases before they become serious threats. The toy factory is the financial engine powering the legal shield around the entire Griffin family. The happy-go-lucky toy factory sits innocently in Quahog, producing children's playthings while secretly serving as the financial backbone of Lois Griffin's family protection operation. Every crime Peter commits, every disaster the family causes, every legal problem that should destroy them, gets resolved through money laundered and distributed via the factory's sophisticated financial systems. Lois learned from the Pewterschmidt Empire how to use legitimate business to hide illegal activity, and she's applied that knowledge perfectly. The factory isn't where joy is made, it's where crimes are erased, transformed from criminal liability into clean corporate revenue that keeps the Griffin family safe from consequences they should have faced years ago. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that Quahog Town Hall is a front for interdimensional politics run by Mayor West's doppelgangers. Quahog Town Hall is not running normal municipal government. When you examine Mayor Adam West's behavior, when you track the impossible decisions coming from that building, when you notice how many versions of the same mayor seem to exist simultaneously, the truth becomes clear. Town Hall is a front operation for interdimensional politics, and Mayor Adam West is not one person but multiple doppelgangers from parallel dimensions who take turns governing Quahog. The building serves as a meeting point where different versions of reality negotiate and coordinate across the multiverse. Mayor Adam West acted insane. Not eccentric, not quirky, actually insane by any normal standard. He fought imaginary enemies, made proclamations that made no sense, engaged in bizarre crusades against threats that didn't exist. He declared war on the sun. He fought a sea monster that nobody else saw. He banned marriage because he got left at the altar. These aren't the actions of a mentally ill person. They're the actions of someone operating with knowledge from multiple dimensions simultaneously. West was fighting enemies and solving problems that existed in other realities, but not in the prime Family Guy universe. Think about how many times West demonstrated knowledge he shouldn't have. He knew about events before they happened. He understood threats that hadn't manifested yet. He talked about people and places that didn't exist in Quahog's reality. Yeah, that's because he wasn't just the mayor of this Quahog, he was simultaneously mayor of multiple Quahogs across different dimensions. Information from other realities bled into his consciousness, making him appear insane when he was actually processing data from parallel universes. Town Hall itself has properties that suggest dimensional instability. The building's interior layout changes between episodes. Rooms appear and disappear. The size of the building doesn't match its external dimensions. Characters enter through one door and exit through another that shouldn't connect. The architecture is impossible because Town Hall exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Different wings of the building extend into different realities, creating a structure that's bigger and more complex than three-dimensional space allows. West had multiple enemies who appeared from nowhere with no backstory. These rivals and antagonists showed up, challenged him, then disappeared completely. A normal mayor doesn't have nemesis appearing from thin air, but an interdimensional mayor would have enemies from other realities who cross over to challenge him. These weren't random crazy people, they were other mayors or leaders from parallel dimensions competing for control over the multiverse's political structure. The decisions made at Town Hall often made no sense for local government, but perfect sense for interdimensional coordination. West would declare things that had nothing to do with running a city. He'd make proclamations about abstract concepts, ban things that didn't need banning, create laws that solved problems nobody in Quahog had. These weren't the ravings of a madman, they were policies affecting other dimensions. He was governing multiple Quahogs simultaneously, and the laws that seemed insane in this reality were necessary in others. Wes showed awareness of the fourth wall and the nature of reality itself. He knew he was in a television show. He referenced episodes and seasons. He understood that his reality was constructed and artificial. That level of meta-awareness doesn't happen naturally. It comes from existing at the intersection of multiple realities, where you can perceive the framework holding those realities together. West could see beyond his own dimension because he occupied a position spanning multiple dimensions. Town Hall staff members showed unusual loyalty and understanding. They followed West's bizarre orders without question. They implemented insane policies without protest. That's not normal bureaucratic compliance. That's awareness of the true situation. The people working at Town Hall know about the interdimensional politics. They're trained to handle multiple versions of the mayor appearing, different realities overlapping, and policies that serve purposes beyond normal government. They're interdimensional civil servants. The building survived every catastrophe that hit Quahog. When the town got destroyed by nuclear weapons, floods, invasions, and disasters, Town Hall remained standing or was restored instantly. That's because the building has dimensional anchors in multiple realities simultaneously. Destroy the Town Hall in this dimension, and it still exists in dozens of others. The structure reasserts itself because it's essential infrastructure for interdimensional governance. Without Town Hall, the multiverse's political coordination collapses. West had access to resources and technology that a small city mayor shouldn't possess. He had advanced surveillance capabilities. He knew about secret programs and classified information. He could mobilize responses to threats instantly. These capabilities came from his position in interdimensional politics. As mayor of multiple Quahogs across multiple dimensions, he had combined resources from all those realities. He could call on technology from advanced dimensions, knowledge from alternate timelines, and support from versions of Quahog that were more developed. The mayor's office itself is a dimensional nexus. When characters enter that office, strange things happen. Time moves differently. People experience déjà vu. Conversations loop back on themselves. That's because the office exists at the intersection of multiple timelines. When you sit in the mayor's chair, you're simultaneously sitting in that chair across dozens of dimensions. The office is the control room where different versions of West coordinate their activities across the multiverse. West's death in real life led to the character being retired from the show. But within the show's reality, this can be explained through dimensional theory. One version of West died, but other versions continue existing in parallel dimensions. The Prime Family Guy universe lost its West, but other Quahogs still have theirs. Town Hall continues operating because other dimensional variants of West are still governing their versions of Quahog, and those governance structures affect all dimensions through the Town Hall nexus. The new mayor who took over after West showed none of the same awareness or capabilities. That's because the replacement is just a normal person governing one dimension's Quahog. They don't have access to the interdimensional political structure. They can't coordinate across realities. Town Hall under new leadership has reverted to normal municipal function in the prime dimension, but the building still serves its interdimensional purpose in layers of reality the new mayor can't perceive. West held meetings that nobody else attended. He'd be in conference rooms alone talking to empty chairs, making deals with invisible participants. Those weren't hallucinations, those were interdimensional meetings. The other participants existed in parallel dimensions and were present in their versions of Town Hall simultaneously. West could perceive and communicate with them, while observers in his dimension only saw him talking to nobody. The Town Hall archives contain impossible records, documents from dates that haven't occurred yet, records of events that never happened in this timeline, files on people who don't exist in this reality. These archives store information from multiple dimensions. The building serves as a repository for records across the multiverse, creating an impossible library where past, present, and future from different realities all exist simultaneously on file. West made diplomatic contacts with entities that shouldn't exist. He negotiated with organizations nobody else could identify. He attended summits that were never announced. He represented Quahog in contexts that made no sense. That's because he was conducting diplomacy with other dimensional governments. When he attended a summit, he was meeting with mayors or leaders from parallel realities to coordinate policies, affecting multiple dimensions. Town Hall's budget made no sense. The city spent money on programs that didn't exist, allocated funds to departments nobody could identify, and had income from sources that couldn't be traced. That's because the budget incorporated resources from multiple dimensions. Money flowed between realities through Town Hall's financial systems. West could access funding from wealthy Quahogs to support programs in poor Quahogs, balancing resources across the multiverse. The building's security was excessive for a small city hall. Advanced surveillance systems, heavily armed guards, restricted areas with clearance levels that made no sense for municipal government. This security wasn't protecting normal city operations. It was securing a dimensional nexus. Town Hall needed security to prevent unauthorized dimensional crossings, protect sensitive information from other realities, and ensure the integrity of interdimensional political processes. West sometimes appeared in multiple places simultaneously. Characters would see the mayor at Town Hall, then minutes later encounter him across town, with no explanation for how he traveled so fast. That's because multiple West doppelgangers exist in the same dimension at the same time. Different versions from different dimensions occasionally overlap in the prime reality, creating situations where two or more Wests are physically present in Quahog simultaneously. The mayor's public appearances followed patterns that suggested coordination across dimensions. West would make statements that aligned perfectly with events happening in other Fox animated universes. When significant things occurred in The Simpsons or American Dad, West would make seemingly random proclamations that actually related to those events. He was coordinating with leaders from other animated realities, making sure policies aligned across the Fox multiverse. Town Hall hosted events that attracted impossible attendees, foreign dignitaries who didn't represent real countries, officials from organizations that didn't exist, delegations speaking languages nobody recognized. These weren't frauds or hallucinations, they were representatives from other dimensions. Town Hall serves as a neutral meeting ground where beings from different realities can gather for diplomatic purposes. The building's construction materials are unusual. The stone and metal used in Town Hall don't match anything else in Quahog's architecture. Chemical analysis would probably show elements that don't exist naturally in this dimension. The building was constructed using materials sourced from multiple realities, creating a structure that's physically stable across dimensional boundaries. Normal buildings exist in one reality. Town Hall exists in all of them. West's personal history was inconsistent and impossible to verify. Different sources gave different backgrounds for him. His past changed depending on who was asked. That's because multiple West variants have different histories. The West governing this Quahog might have one background, while West from another dimension has a completely different past. When people research the mayor's history, they're accessing information from multiple Wests across multiple dimensions. Town Hall announcements and proclamations were broadcast in ways that reached beyond Quahog. The mayor's statements would somehow be heard in other Fox animated universes. Characters in The Simpsons or American Dad would reference things Mayor West said, even though there's no normal communication channel between those shows. West's broadcasts went out across dimensional frequencies, allowing his messages to reach other realities. The building's basement extended impossibly deep. Characters descending into Town Hall's lower levels have encountered areas that shouldn't exist based on the building's location and Quahog's geography. The basement goes down dozens of floors, passing below the water table, below the bedrock, into spaces that violate physical laws. Those lower levels extend into other dimensions, providing access to infrastructure that exists in parallel realities. West had knowledge of everyone in Quahog that exceeded normal mayoral access. He knew intimate details about people's lives without investigation. He understood their motivations and histories without asking. That's because he governed multiple versions of these same people across multiple dimensions. He knew Peter Griffin in 100 realities, so he understood Peter on a level no single dimension mayor could achieve. This knowledge informed his interactions and policies. Town hall elections were staged theatrical events with predetermined outcomes. West won every election by impossible margins. Opposition candidates disappeared or withdrew mysteriously. Voting irregularities were obvious but never investigated. That's because the elections weren't actually choosing a mayor, they were maintaining the appearance of democratic process while the real governance happened across dimensions. West's position was secured by interdimensional agreement, not local voting. The building's clock tower showed different times simultaneously. Look at the clock from one angle and it says 3 o'clock. Look from another angle and it shows 7:30. The clock displays time from multiple dimensions at once. Time flows differently in different realities, and Town Hall's clock reflects this by showing multiple times simultaneously, depending on which dimensional layer you're perceiving. West communicated with his doppelgangers through systems built into Town Hall. The building has communication equipment that operates across dimensions. When West needed to coordinate with his other versions, he'd use these systems to hold conferences with himself from parallel realities. Observers would see him talking to himself, but he was actually having strategic discussions with his dimensional variants. Town Hall's role in Quahog's reality problems becomes clear through this framework. The town resets after disasters because Town Hall coordinates the reset across dimensions. When Quahog gets destroyed, West and his doppelgangers activate protocols that restore the town using templates from undamaged dimensions. The building serves as the mechanism controlling Quahog's relationship with time, space, and causality across multiple realities. The policies West implemented often caused short-term chaos but long-term stability. He'd do something that seemed completely insane. Quahog would spiral into crisis, then mysteriously everything would work out. That's because his policies were designed to affect multiple dimensions. The chaos in one dimension created stability in others. West was optimizing across the multiverse, not just managing one city. His decisions benefited the collective Quahogs even when they harmed the specific Quahog he was visibly governing. Town Hall employment records show people who never worked there, and missing records for people who definitely did. The personnel files are a mess of contradictions and impossibilities. That's because the records combine data from multiple dimensions. Employees who worked at Town Hall in other realities appear in the files. Workers who only existed in the prime dimension might not show up because their records got overwritten by data from a different reality. West's final acts before his character's retirement involved setting up systems to continue without him. He established protocols, appointed successors, and created structures that would maintain Town Hall's interdimensional function even without his active presence. He knew one version of himself was ending, so he ensured the multiverse coordination would continue through institutional mechanisms rather than relying on his personal presence. The building itself gained more autonomy after West's departure. Town Hall began making decisions independent of the mayor's office. Policies appeared without anyone enacting them. The building was operating on programming West installed, continuing interdimensional governance through automated systems his doppelgangers created across multiple realities. Town Hall became a self-running, interdimensional government building that no longer needed a single visible leader. Quahog Town Hall stands at the center of Quahog as a monument to municipal government, but it's actually the command center for politics spanning infinite dimensions. Mayor Adam West wasn't one eccentric leader, but a composite of infinite versions coordinating across realities, using Town Hall as their meeting point and control system. Every bizarre policy, every insane decision, every impossible action was interdimensional governance playing out in a dimension whose residents couldn't perceive the true scope. The building doesn't govern one city, it manages infinite cities, coordinating the political structure of the multiverse through the actions of a mayor who existed everywhere and nowhere simultaneously, using Quahog as the anchor point for a governmental system spanning all possible realities. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that the Dr. Hartman Medical Center harvests clones of Peter to keep Quahog running. Dr. Hartman's medical center is not providing normal health care. When you examine Peter Griffin's impossible survival rate, when you track how quickly he recovers from fatal injuries, when you notice Dr. Hartman's casual attitude toward catastrophic medical situations, the evidence becomes overwhelming. The medical center is running a cloning operation that produces copies of Peter Griffin, and these clones serve multiple purposes. They replace Peter when he dies, provide spare parts for repairs, and most disturbing of all, their organs and tissue are harvested to keep other Quahog residents alive and functioning. Dr. Hartman has turned his medical practice into a clone farm with Peter as the primary product. Peter Griffin dies constantly. He gets decapitated, crushed, exploded, shot, stabbed, and killed in ways that absolutely end human life. In one episode, his skeleton is completely removed from his body and he's just a pile of flesh on the floor. In another, he gets his head blown off. He's been cut in half, burned alive, and suffered fatal injuries dozens of times across hundreds of episodes. Yet he's always fine by the next scene or next episode. That's not cartoon physics or lucky survival, that's systematic replacement. When Peter dies, Dr. Hartman activates a clone from storage, and that clone takes over Peter's life with nobody noticing the switch. Look at how fast Peter recovers from injuries that should require months of healing. He breaks bones and he's walking the next day. He suffers massive trauma and he's back to normal immediately. He's had organs removed and continues functioning without them. Normal human biology cannot explain this recovery rate, but clone replacement can. Peter doesn't heal from these injuries, he gets replaced by an undamaged clone. The injured Peter dies or gets disposed of, and a fresh Peter clone takes his place. The continuity of Peter's existence is an illusion maintained by an endless supply of identical replacements. Dr. Hartman shows no surprise when Peter survives impossible injuries. A normal doctor would be shocked when a patient comes back from fatal trauma. Dr. Hartman just treats it as routine. He's seen Peter die and return dozens of times because he's the one managing the replacement system. When Peter shows up at the hospital after being killed, Hartman knows this is a clone, not the original. He performs whatever minimal treatment maintains the illusion, while preparing the next clone for the inevitable next fatal incident. The medical center has capabilities that make no sense for a small city hospital. They have advanced surgical facilities, extensive storage areas, and equipment that suggests research operations beyond normal healthcare. The building is larger than it should be, with wings and sections that patients never see. Those hidden areas are where the cloning happens. Dr. Hartman runs the public-facing medical practice as cover for the clone production facility, operating in the restricted sections of the building. Think about the resources required for cloning. You need genetic material, growth acceleration technology, memory imprinting systems to give clones Peter's personality and memories, and storage for mature clones ready to deploy. The medical center has all of this hidden within its structure. The basement levels and restricted wings contain clone banks where dozens or hundreds of Peter Griffins exist in suspended animation, waiting to be activated when the current Peter dies. Dr. Hartman's incompetence is deliberate misdirection. He acts like a bumbling idiot who misdiagnoses everything and performs unnecessary procedures. This makes people think he's harmless and stupid. Nobody suspects that the incompetent doctor is actually running a sophisticated cloning operation. His public incompetence provides cover for his real work. While everyone thinks he's an idiot who barely graduated medical school, he's actually a genius geneticist producing and managing human clones. The unnecessary procedures Hartman performs serve the cloning operation. He takes tissue samples he claims are for tests but actually uses for clone production. He removes organs he says are diseased but actually harvests for the clone system. Every time Peter visits for a routine checkup, Hartman is collecting genetic material and biological samples to maintain and improve the clone stock. Peter thinks he's getting normal medical care, but he's actually being farmed for material to produce more copies of himself. Peter has had his entire body reconstructed multiple times throughout the series. He's been reduced to component parts and put back together. He's had brain surgery, organ transplants, and systematic rebuilding that should be impossible. That's because Hartman isn't repairing the original Peter, he's assembling new Peters from cloned parts. When Peter's body is too damaged to replace wholesale, Hartman swaps out individual components. Brain from one clone, heart from another, organs from a third, all assembled into a functioning Peter. The clones are not just for Peter replacement. They're being harvested to keep all of Quahog running. When Joe needs new legs, where do those come from? When Quagmire needs organ replacement, where does Hartman source the parts? When any Quahog resident needs biological material, Hartman provides it from his clone bank. Peter clones are the universal donor supply for the entire town. Their organs, tissue, and body parts get harvested and used to repair and maintain everyone else. This explains why medical costs never bankrupt the Griffin family despite constant hospital visits. Peter should owe millions in medical bills from his endless injuries and treatments. But the costs are minimal or non-existent because Hartman isn't actually providing expensive medical care. He's just swapping clones and harvesting parts from his existing stock. The medical center makes money from insurance fraud, billing for procedures that never happened while actually just managing the clone inventory. Lois has never questioned Peter's impossible survival rate. She's watched him die and return countless times without investigating how it's possible. That's because she knows about the clones. Hartman probably approached the family years ago and explained the system. When Peter inevitably dies from his stupidity, clones are available to replace him so the family doesn't lose their husband and father. Lois accepted this arrangement because the alternative is watching Peter actually die permanently from one of his many fatal incidents. The children show signs of knowing too. They've witnessed Peter's deaths and resurrections without appropriate trauma responses. Kids who watch their father die should be psychologically destroyed. Meg, Chris, and Stewie treat it as normal because they've been conditioned to understand that Peter is replaceable. When Dad dies, a new identical dad appears and life continues. They've never known a world where Peter isn't backed up by clones. Stewie's advanced technology and scientific knowledge might come from exposure to the medical center's cloning systems. A baby doesn't develop genius-level genetics and engineering skills from nowhere. If Stewie spent time around the clone facility as an infant, if he was exposed to the technology and procedures, his developing brain could have absorbed that knowledge. He built time machines and advanced devices because he learned from observing Hartman's cloning operation. Brian the talking dog provides more evidence. A dog that walks upright, talks, and functions as human is biologically impossible without genetic engineering. Brian is not a normal dog, he's a genetically modified creation. The same facility that produces Peter clones could have created Brian through similar processes. Hartman experiments with genetic manipulation beyond just cloning, creating entirely new forms of life. Brian is proof that the medical center can and does produce living beings that shouldn't exist. The clones explain Peter's changing personality and intelligence across episodes. Sometimes Peter is relatively functional, other times he's completely brain-dead. These aren't character inconsistencies, they're different clones with variations in cognitive capability. The cloning process isn't perfect. Some batches produce Peters who are slightly smarter, others produce Peters who are dumber. The Peter you're watching in any given episode might be a different clone than the Peter from the previous episode, explaining the personality drift. Memory continuity between clones is maintained through neural imprinting technology. When a clone is activated, it receives a memory download from the previous Peter. This isn't perfect, which explains why Peter forgets major events and experiences memory gaps. The transfer process loses some data, creating holes in the clone's memory. Peter doesn't remember things because those memories never successfully transferred from the previous clone to the current one. Dr. Hartman has access to Peter at all times through monitoring systems. The clones probably have tracking implants that let Hartman monitor vital signs remotely. When a Peter dies, Hartman gets an alert, retrieves the body, and deploys a replacement clone within hours. This explains the rapid turnaround. Peter dies in the evening, and by next morning, a fresh Peter is living Peter's life. The medical center operates 24/7, managing the clone rotation. The facility's staff are all complicit in the operation. Nurses, technicians, and other medical personnel know about the clones and help maintain the system. They're paid extremely well for their silence and participation. Some might even be clones themselves, produced by Hartman to serve as loyal workers who can never expose the operation because they're products of it. The entire medical center staff might be clone-based, creating a workforce with built-in loyalty. Quahog's population stability despite constant deaths makes sense through clone replacement. People die in Quahog all the time from Peter's actions, from disasters, from violence. Yet the population remains steady. That's because Hartman replaces the dead with clones. When someone dies, their family gets offered a clone replacement. Most accept because the alternative is permanent loss. The medical center has expanded beyond just Peter clones to producing clones of anyone who dies and whose family wants them back. This creates a town where death is temporary for those who can afford clone replacement. The wealthy definitely have access to this service. Carter Pewterschmidt probably has dozens of clones in storage. When rich people in Quahog die, they resurrect through the clone system. This explains why, no matter what happens, the same characters keep appearing. They're not surviving impossible odds, they're being systematically replaced by clones when they die. The original Peter Griffin probably died years ago. The Peter we watch in current episodes might be the 20th or 50th or 100th clone. Each clone lives for a while, dies from Peter's reckless behavior, and gets replaced by the next clone. There's no continuous Peter Griffin spanning the show's entire run. Instead, there's a succession of Peters, each believing they're the original, while actually being part of a long chain of replacements. Clone degradation might explain Peter getting dumber over time. Early clones were higher quality, closer to the original Peters, intelligence and capability. As cloning continued, each generation degraded slightly. Errors accumulated in the genetic copying process. By now, the Peter clones being produced are significantly dumber than the original Peter. The show's characters haven't gotten dumber due to bad writing, they've gotten dumber due to clone degradation affecting half the cast. Hartman stores hundreds of Peter clones at various ages. There are infant Peter clones, teenage Peter clones, young adult Peter clones, and middle-aged Peter clones. When a Peter dies, Hartman selects a replacement that matches the current Peter's age. This maintains continuity and prevents anyone from noticing that Peter should be aging but isn't. The clone bank contains Peters at every life stage, ready for deployment whenever needed. The clones are not conscious until activated. They exist in suspended animation, brain activity suppressed, essentially alive but not aware. When Hartman needs a new Peter, he wakes one up, imprints the necessary memories, and deploys it. The clone experiences consciousness for the first time, already believing it's Peter Griffin with years of existing memories. It has no knowledge of being a clone or spending time in suspended animation before activation. The medical center's power consumption is abnormally high for a hospital its size. Maintaining hundreds of clones in suspended animation requires enormous energy. Growth acceleration tanks, memory imprinting equipment, genetic sequencing systems, and storage facilities all draw massive power. The facility's electrical usage should raise questions, but it doesn't because Hartman has arrangements with the power company. They provide what he needs without investigation in exchange for clone services when their own employees need replacement. Harvesting. Peter clones for parts creates ethical nightmares that Hartman completely ignores. Each clone is a living human being, genetically identical to Peter, with the potential for full consciousness and personhood. Hartman treats them as inventory, as spare parts to be used when needed. He kills conscious clones to harvest their organs for other patients. He maintains brain-dead Peters on life support to keep their organs fresh for transplant. The medical center is running industrial-scale human rights violations, hidden behind normal hospital operations. The clone program explains Quahog's acceptance of impossible events. The residents have been conditioned through clone exposure to accept things that violate normal reality. When you live in a town where people die and resurrect regularly, where bodies get repaired with cloned parts, where the impossible is routine medical procedure, you stop questioning reality. Quahog residents accept alien invasions and time travel because they're already living in a world where death is optional and human cloning is standard healthcare. Peter's DNA is probably ideal for cloning for some reason. His genetics might have unusual stability or resistance to clone degradation. Hartman chose Peter as the primary clone source because Peter's genetic material produces the highest quality clones with the longest viability. Other people can be cloned, but Peter clones are the gold standard. His tissue is compatible with more recipients, his organs last longer after transplant, his genetic structure is just better suited for the cloning process. The Catholic Church should be investigating this medical center for playing God through human cloning. But religious authorities in Quahog are either bought off, clones themselves, or deliberately kept ignorant. Hartman has probably replaced key religious leaders with clones who won't interfere with his operation. When the local priest is actually a clone produced by the medical center, he's not going to preach against the facility that created him. The facility's waste disposal must be handling enormous amounts of biological material. Failed clones, harvested bodies, extracted organs that weren't suitable for use, all this requires disposal. The medical center probably has industrial incinerators running constantly, burning the evidence of their clone production. The smoke people see from the hospital isn't from normal medical waste, it's from hundreds of failed or used clones being destroyed. Hartman keeps meticulous records of every clone produced, deployed, and harvested. These records are stored in secure systems that track which Peter clone is currently active, which clones are in storage, which bodies have been disposed of, and which parts have been harvested for use. The database is incredibly detailed because mixing up clones or losing track of deployments would expose the entire operation. Every Peter needs perfect documentation to maintain the illusion of continuity. The medical center has protocols for emergency clone deployment. If Peter dies publicly where recovery of the body is impossible, Hartman has backup plans. A new Peter clone is introduced claiming he survived against all odds, or the death gets covered up, and a clone quietly takes over Peter's life while everyone is told Peter was just injured. The system is flexible enough to handle any scenario where Peter needs replacement under difficult circumstances. Insurance companies know about the cloning and cooperate because it's profitable. Keeping Peter alive through clones is cheaper than paying life insurance benefits to his family. The insurers would rather pay for clone maintenance than for Peter's death payout. They've made arrangements with Hartman where they fund the cloning operation in exchange for keeping their policyholders alive indefinitely. It's a business decision that benefits both parties while victimizing the clones who are treated as property. The clones have no legal rights or protections. They're not registered as people. They have no birth certificates or social security numbers. They exist entirely outside the legal system. This lets Hartman use them however he wants without legal consequences. You can't prosecute someone for murdering a clone if the clone legally doesn't exist as a person. The medical center operates in a legal gray area where human cloning is neither explicitly permitted nor forbidden, and Hartman exploits that ambiguity ruthlessly. Quahog's future depends entirely on the clone program continuing. So many residents have been replaced by clones or repaired with cloned parts that stopping the operation would reveal the truth to hundreds of families. The town is locked into accepting the system because the alternative is admitting that most of Quahog's population isn't who they think they are. The medical center has made itself indispensable by integrating clone technology so deeply into the town's infrastructure that Quahog cannot function without it. Dr. Hartman's medical center is not healing Quahog, it's maintaining Quahog through systematic human cloning and organ harvesting, using Peter Griffin as the primary genetic source. Every Peter who dies gets replaced by a clone from the facility's extensive storage banks. Every resident who needs medical intervention receives cloned tissue or organs harvested from Peter duplicates. The entire town runs on a hidden infrastructure of human cloning that turns Peter Griffin into a renewable biological resource, farmed and processed to keep Quahog's population alive and functional, while the original Peter Griffin has been dead for years, replaced by an endless succession of copies who live, die, and get replaced in a cycle that Dr. Hartman maintains with cold efficiency behind the facade of incompetent medical practice. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have the theory that Quahog's suburban neighborhood was built directly over a cursed native time loop. The Quahog suburban neighborhood, particularly Spooner Street and the surrounding residential areas, sits on cursed ground. When you examine the impossible repetition of events, when you track how many times the same scenarios play out with slight variations, when you notice that nobody in the neighborhood can escape their patterns no matter how hard they try, the evidence becomes undeniable. The entire suburban district was built directly over a Native American sacred site that contains a temporal curse, and that curse has trapped everyone living there in an endless time loop. The residents repeat the same behaviors, face the same conflicts, and live the same lives over and over because the land beneath their homes won't let them break free. Quahog was built on land that originally belonged to Native American tribes. This is established fact in the show's universe. The area has history going back centuries before European settlement. When colonizers took this land, they built over sacred sites without understanding or caring what they were disturbing. The Quahog suburban neighborhood sits on what was once a ceremonial ground, where native tribes performed rituals related to time, cycles, and eternal recurrence. The curse was placed either as protection against desecration or as revenge for the land being stolen and built upon. The Griffin family has lived in the same house on Spooner Street for over 20 years of episodes without anyone aging. Peter and Lois stay the same age. Their children never grow up. Stewie remains a baby forever. Chris never graduates high school. Meg never escapes her teenage years. That's not cartoon convention, that's the curse manifesting. The land traps families in specific life stages and refuses to let time progress normally. Everyone on Spooner Street is frozen in a temporal loop, where they age infinitely slowly or not at all because the cursed ground beneath them has locked them into eternal recurrence. Look at the repetitive nature of events on Spooner Street. The same conflicts happen over and over. Peter fights the chicken repeatedly in nearly identical scenarios. He gets drunk and does something stupid, faces consequences, then does it again. Lois gets frustrated with Peter, threatens to leave, then stays. Meg tries to improve her life and gets beaten down back to outcast status. These aren't character flaws creating patterns. These are the curse forcing everyone to repeat the same narrative cycles. The land makes them relive variations of the same events eternally. The neighbors on Spooner Street show the same repetitive patterns. Joe has been a paraplegic cop dealing with the same frustrations about his disability for decades. Quagmire has been the sex-obsessed neighbor pursuing women with the same techniques forever. Cleveland was the mild-mannered friend stuck in an unhappy marriage until he physically left Quahog and broke the curse's hold on him. When he returned to Spooner Street, he immediately fell back into the same patterns because the cursed land reasserted its control. Cleveland's departure and return proves the curse is geographically bound. When he moved to Stool Bend, Virginia for his own show, he experienced actual character development and life changes. His personality evolved, his relationships progressed, time moved forward in meaningful ways. But the moment he returned to Spooner Street, all that development vanished. He reverted to exactly who he was before leaving. The curse only affects people living on the cursed ground. Leave the neighborhood and you can break free temporarily, but return, and you're immediately trapped again in your assigned loop. The land itself has unusual properties that suggest cursed ground. The neighborhood's geography makes no sense and changes between episodes. Streets connect differently, houses appear and disappear, the layout shifts. That's because the cursed ground exists partially outside normal space. The native curse didn't just affect time, it warped the physical reality of the land. Space and geography on Spooner Street follow rules determined by the curse rather than normal physics. Animals on Spooner Street behave abnormally. Brian the dog talks and walks upright. Other animals in the neighborhood show intelligence and capabilities they shouldn't have. That's the curse affecting all living things on the land, not just humans. The native rituals performed there probably involved animal spirits and totems. When the curse activated, it altered how animals function within the neighborhood's boundaries. Brian isn't a genetic anomaly, he's a normal dog, transformed by living on cursed ground his entire life. The houses on Spooner Street have witnessed impossible numbers of traumatic events without anyone moving away. The Griffin house specifically has been the site of deaths, violence, disasters, and horrible incidents. Any normal family would move after experiencing a fraction of what the Griffins have endured in that house. But they stay. They can't leave. The curse binds families to their homes on the cursed land. People living there feel compelled to remain despite every rational reason to relocate. Think about the founding of Quahog and how the suburban areas were developed. The show has referenced the town's colonial history and early settlement. When Europeans built Quahog, they chose land near water for shipping and trade. The specific area where the suburbs now exist was probably chosen because it was flat, clear, and easy to develop. But it was clear because the native tribes kept it that way for ceremonial purposes. The colonizers saw empty land and built on it, not understanding it was empty for a reason. The curse activates through repetition and cycles, which aligns with Native American spiritual concepts about circular time and eternal return. Many indigenous cultures view time as cyclical rather than linear. The curse imposed this cyclical time structure on the land. Instead of time moving forward in a straight line like normal reality, time on Spooner Street moves in loops. Events repeat with variations, but the fundamental patterns remain constant because the curse enforces cyclical rather than linear temporal progression. Every family on Spooner Street is trapped in their own specific loop variation. The Griffins repeat family dysfunction patterns. The Swansons repeat disability and relationship struggles. The Browns repeated marital unhappiness until Cleveland escaped. Quagmire repeats sexual conquest patterns. Each family has their assigned narrative that they cycle through eternally. The curse doesn't put everyone in the same loop, it assigns different looping patterns based on who the family is and what role they play in the neighborhood's structure. The neighborhood has survived catastrophes that should have destroyed it completely. Floods, fires, explosions, all manner of disasters have hit Spooner Street. Houses get destroyed and they're back to normal the next episode. That's not fast reconstruction, that's the curse resetting the neighborhood to its default state. The land remembers what it's supposed to look like and restores itself after damage. Destroy a house and the curse rebuilds it overnight because the cursed ground contains a template of how the neighborhood should appear. Objects on Spooner Street show temporal anomalies. The Griffin family car gets destroyed repeatedly but always comes back. Furniture and possessions that get ruined reappear. Personal items that should wear out or break remain functional forever. The curse affects not just the land and people, but everything on the cursed ground. Objects exist in the same time loop as the residents, resetting to their default state when damaged or destroyed. The newspaper delivery in the neighborhood brings the same basic news over and over. Different specific events, but the same types of stories. The same patterns of local incidents. That's because the curse extends to information flow within the neighborhood. News and media reaching Spooner Street get filtered through the temporal loop, emerging as variations on the same themes. The residents read what feels like different news but is actually the same news repeated in different words. Children born on Spooner Street show signs of the curse from birth. Stewie was born with advanced intelligence and capabilities that develop instantly. Normal babies don't build weapons and time machines, but Stewie exists on cursed ground that warps development and ability. The curse affected him from conception, giving him awareness and capacity beyond normal human limits because he's not developing under normal temporal rules. He exists in the time loop from birth, which gives him perception of reality that others lack. The curse explains why Stewie can build time machines successfully. He's trying to break the temporal loop trapping everyone. His time travel technology works because he's operating within a cursed temporal field that makes time manipulation easier. Building a time machine on normal ground would be impossible with current technology, but on cursed ground where time already behaves abnormally, the barriers between past, present, and future are weakened. Stewie exploits the curse's temporal distortions to create technology that shouldn't exist. Native American imagery and references appear throughout Quahog, particularly in the older parts of town. Museums have artifacts, historical sites reference indigenous presence, and the town's founding narrative acknowledges displacing native populations. But nobody connects the current problems to that history. The residents live on stolen sacred ground without understanding that their repetitive trapped existence is a direct consequence of that theft. The land itself is enforcing justice through the curse. The specific ritual site that Spooner Street was built over probably involved ceremonies for ancestors in cyclical time. Native tribes would gather there to honor those who came before and to maintain the cycles of seasons, life, and death. These were powerful rituals that created spiritual resonance in the land. When the site was desecrated and built over, that spiritual energy didn't disappear, it corrupted. The positive cycles of natural time became negative loops of enforced repetition. The curse is twisted ceremonial power that never got released properly. Elders in the native tribes probably warned against building on this land. When Quahog was being developed, there were likely native voices saying this specific area was sacred and shouldn't be disturbed. The colonizers ignored these warnings because they didn't respect indigenous spiritual beliefs. They built the suburbs anyway, and the curse activated. The native people who understood what would happen are long gone or displaced, and the current residents suffer the consequences without knowing why. The curse needs the neighborhood occupied to function. Empty land wouldn't create the same effect. The temporal loop requires living beings to trap, events to repeat, and consciousness to affect. That's why the curse makes people unable to leave permanently. It needs residents to fuel the looping. Each family living on Spooner Street feeds energy into the curse through their repetitive behaviors. Their trapped existence powers the temporal distortion that keeps them trapped, creating a self-sustaining cycle. Attempts to break the curse probably happen unconsciously all the time. When characters try to change their lives, pursue different paths, or escape their patterns, they're fighting against the curse. But the land pushes back. It creates circumstances that force them back into their loops. Meg tries to improve herself and the universe conspires against her because the curse needs her in the outcast role. Peter tries to mature and growth gets undone because the curse requires him to be a man-child forever. Every attempt at genuine change gets countered by the cursed ground enforcing its patterns. The neighborhood's isolation from the rest of Quahog is more than geographic. Spooner Street and the surrounding suburban blocks exist in a bubble created by the curse. Events happening in downtown Quahog or other parts of town don't affect the suburb the same way. Time moves slightly differently. Causality works differently. The cursed neighborhood operates under its own rules, separate from the rest of the town. Cross the boundary leaving the suburb and you enter normal reality. Return and you're back in the curse's domain. Seasonal changes happen on Spooner Street, but they repeat identically. The same autumn happens over and over. The same winter. The same spring and summer. The seasons cycle through, but each iteration is identical to the last. Trees lose leaves in the same pattern. Snow falls in the same amounts. Weather repeats because the curse controls natural cycles within its territory. Nature itself is trapped in the loop, executing the same seasonal changes eternally without variation. The curse affects memory formation for residents. People living on Spooner Street have difficulty retaining memories of events that break their pattern. When something truly unique happens, they forget it quickly and revert to remembering only the pattern-consistent events. This is why characters don't remember catastrophes or major incidents. The curse edits their memories to maintain the loop. Remember only what fits the pattern, forget what doesn't, and the cycle continues smoothly. Dreams and sleep on the cursed ground bring visions of the loop. Characters have recurring nightmares about being trapped, about repeating the same actions endlessly, about time being wrong. These aren't random anxiety dreams, they're the subconscious mind perceiving the curse's effects. During sleep, awareness of the temporal trap surfaces because the conscious mind's defenses are down. People on Spooner Street know they're trapped at some deep level, but waking consciousness suppresses that knowledge because it's too terrible to accept. The native curse probably requires specific conditions to break. Traditional curses can be lifted through rituals, acknowledgement of wrongdoing, and restoration of what was taken. Breaking the Spooner Street curse would require recognizing the land as sacred, honoring the displaced tribes, and probably leaving the neighborhood permanently abandoned to return to natural state. But nobody knows this because the curse itself prevents residents from understanding they're cursed. It creates blindness to its own existence. Animals native to the area before colonization behave differently than introduced species. Native birds and animals that existed there before European settlement move freely between the cursed neighborhood and normal areas without getting trapped. But introduced species like the domestic animals that came with colonizers get affected by the curse. This is why Brian, a domestic dog, became a talking, upright being, while wild animals passing through remain normal. The curse distinguishes between what belongs on the land naturally and what was brought by the invaders. The curse's power waxes and wanes with certain times and events. During specific dates that align with the original native ceremonies, the temporal loops intensify. Characters experience even more repetitive behavior. Déjà vu becomes overwhelming, and the sense of being trapped peaks. These dates correspond to when the tribes would have performed their most powerful rituals. The curse draws strength from the spiritual resonance those dates still carry in the land itself. Underground beneath Spooner Street, there are probably physical remnants of the sacred site. Buried ceremonial objects, remains of ritual structures, items of spiritual significance. These physical anchors help power the curse. As long as they remain buried and disturbed beneath suburban foundations, the curse continues. If someone excavated and properly removed these items, the curse might weaken. But development has built over them so thoroughly that accessing them would require destroying the entire neighborhood. The curse explains Quahog's relationship with time across the entire town. While Spooner Street is the epicenter, the curse's effects radiate outward, affecting all of Quahog to some degree. The whole town experiences temporal problems, but the suburb built directly on the sacred site experiences them most intensely. The further you get from Spooner Street, the weaker the curse's influence becomes, until you reach areas like downtown or the docks where time moves more normally. Native spirits might still be present in the land, trapped by the same curse that traps the suburban residents. The spirits who performed rituals there centuries ago could be locked in their own loops, unable to move on, forced to watch the desecration of their sacred ground eternally. These spirits don't actively torment the residents, they're victims too. But their presence adds power to the curse. Spiritual entities trapped in temporal loops create resonance that strengthens the curse affecting living residents. The only people who've successfully escaped Spooner Street long-term are those who completely severed ties with Quahog. Cleveland partially escaped by moving away but maintained connections to his old life. When those connections pulled him back, the curse recaptured him. True escape requires total separation from anyone and anything connected to the cursed neighborhood. Leave and never look back, never return, never maintain contact with anyone still trapped there. Only through complete abandonment of that life can someone break the curse's hold. Environmental surveys of the area would show unusual readings if anyone bothered to check. Magnetic field anomalies, temporal distortions detectable by sensitive instruments, and energy signatures that don't match normal background radiation. The cursed ground emits measurable effects that science could detect, but nobody investigates because the curse makes people not ask questions. The same force that traps residents in behavioral loops prevents them from examining why their reality works the way it does. Local historians have probably documented strange occurrences in the neighborhood going back to when it was first developed. The first families who moved to Spooner Street likely experienced the curse's activation. Initial residents would have noticed time working strangely, events repeating, inability to leave or change. These early reports exist in historical records somewhere, but they've been forgotten or dismissed. The curse ensures its own history gets erased, so each new generation of residents experiences it fresh without foreknowledge. The Quahog suburban neighborhood with Spooner Street at its heart exists in a state of temporal imprisonment enforced by land that was sacred to native peoples and cursed when colonizers built over it, without permission or respect. Every resident is trapped in behavioral loops they cannot escape, living the same life patterns repeatedly, unable to age or grow or change in meaningful ways because the cursed ground beneath their homes has locked them into eternal cyclical time. The native curse is perfect revenge for stolen land. The thieves and their descendants are forced to live on it forever, trapped in place, repeating their lives endlessly, unable to leave or move forward while the land itself remembers what it was and punishes what it has become. The suburbs are a prison disguised as the American dream, where families pursue happiness on cursed ground that will never let them find it, cycling through the same joys and sorrows forever until someone finally understands what was done to create this place and makes the impossible choice to abandon it completely. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video,